but it's really the Super Bowl of politics here in Washington. It's a big political audience. And a lot at stake for the president tonight, Rick. What's the one big thing you're going to be watching for?
Well, we're here in a noisy bar, and it's been a noisy presidency. This is a relative moment of quiet. This is when the entire country, the Congress, voters, everyone focuses their attention on one man. The man who walks down that aisle is introduced as the President of the United States, and he outlines his vision. And it's a chance for President Trump, after all of the chaos and all of the storylines and all of the headlines that have been flowing about, just to quiet all of that, refocus his presidency, refocus his agenda, and start to provide something of a roadmap during the beginning of this critical midterm election year.
That's something the White House is looking for. They want to reset a moment. Tara Palmieri, you've been talking to a lot of White House aides. You just got back from Davos, Switzerland, where the president was recently. Give us your sense of how they're feeling tonight and what's the one big thing you're going to be looking for.
Well, President Trump has started to learn the importance of leading through rhetoric, and he really does give a good show. As long as he's following the teleprompter, as we saw in Davos, he was received really well. It really matters who's writing the actual content of the script. We know that Gary Cohn, his National Economic Advisor, General McMaster of the National Security Council, and Stephen Miller, one of his aides, they were all a part of this. They come from different ideological spectrums. We know that Stephen's on the right, and we know that Gary is more on the left side, and McMaster is a military man sort of in the middle. But they've all sort of put their own pieces into this, and there's been a lot of anticipation. They want to surprise us with some news, as always. Trump is a programmer, he's a producer, he knows how to give a show, so expect the guests to have really big roles, and we should just, expect him to give that same gusto. But the thing is, compared to last year, the bar is higher, because last year, everyone was shocked to see him acting presidential, to seeing him sticking to the script, and to giving a good speech. But now we've already seen that, so now the bar is higher.
Right, and we know that he can read off the teleprompter. Exactly. A lot of people have been saying that for the last couple of days. Don't let that be how you judge this. Exactly.
Right. And of course, all the things that are looming over this big moment, the Russia probe, another potential shutdown, government funding runs out in a few days. There's so much at stake, of course, the 2018 election, which you're closely tracking, Rick. A lot at stake tonight. We hope, again, that you're engaging with us on our social platforms. We want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your questions a little bit later. If you have them for us, please, Tara or Rick, we're happy to tackle them, and our team at home. And tell your friends. Join us on Roku. We're on Xbox. We're on Apple TV. We're on Facebook. All the above. Join us tonight. Again, coming you here from the Hawk and Dove Bar, where a lot of people are interested in this conversation. We're going to talk to these folks in a second. Let's hear from some of the students out in Washington University in St. Louis. That's where Amna Navaz has been holding court. Amna, what are you hearing there?
Hey guys, that's right. We are live here in Washington University in St. Louis. We are in what's called the Fun Room, which is the appropriate place, I think, to watch the State of the Union address. But all these folks are gathered here. Say hi, everybody. Hi. Just to hang out, watch, and see what the president has to say. We're going to talk to one right now. You're going to hear from a lot more as the night goes on. This is Tyler. Tyler is from St. Charles, Missouri. You are a junior here, right?
Yes.
And what is it you want to hear from the president?
So I want to see President Trump plot a clear path forward on where he wants to take our country. It seems like each time I check my phone, there's a new fire that he has to put out, or the government is really struggling to complete just basic tasks. So I'd like to see him articulate a vision about not just where he wants to take our base, his base, but where he wants to take the entire country.
There you have it. That's one view from right here in St. Louis. And of course, this whole room, everyone's been talking about what they want to hear. They want to hear about immigration. They want to hear about trade. They want to hear about foreign policy. We're going to get to all of it just down the line. Back down to you in Washington.
A lot of people in this bar that just want to relax. You cannot have this.
Okay.
I'm going to make a
All right, thank you so much, Amna. We got quite the crowd here. In fact, they're asking what we're doing. We're telling them, join us on abcnews.com, Facebook, ABC News app. We hope you're doing that and engaging with us. But Rick, you're going to go talk to some folks here. We've been listening tonight, a lot of anticipation with this State of the Union. Maybe that's a Washington thing.
Well, it's also where we are. We're just a couple blocks away from the Capitol.
Walk over with us over here now. We're walking. This is Dina. We were talking with Dina a little bit earlier. Dina, great to see you. Tell us where you're from and what you're hoping to hear from the president tonight.
I am from New York, but I live in D.C., and what we're expecting tonight or waiting for is the tweet that will blow up tomorrow. So I think he'll give a good on-teleprompter speech with a lot of red meat for the Republicans, but everybody is going to be waiting for the tweet storm to inevitably happen tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Last year, when he gave the joint address, it was just a few days later that he tweeted about Jim Comey and the wiretaps and the like.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting. And I mean, he'll talk about Dreamers. He'll talk about, probably won't talk about Russia, but it would be interesting if he did. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Great. And we know.
What do you think could happen, really?
Glad you're here. You can be watching with us. And we're going to put you on the spot. What's your name, and what would you say in one word the State of the Union is?
My name is Hadley Williams, and traditional.
Traditional. The State of the Union is traditional. Okay, that's different. But let's go talk with some other folks up here at the bar that we made. These are actually just a couple of old Washington hands. We're going to keep this quick because we got to go over to Cecilia Vega, but Rick Klein here with a couple of old friends.
This is a bipartisan pairing, and look, the parties can get along. Jim Manley, veteran Democratic strategist, worked for Harry Reid and Ted Kennedy, and Ned Ryan from American Majority, a conservative strategist. Guys, when you're watching this today, do you want to like banter with someone from the other party a little bit to say, hey, what are you seeing in this? What am I seeing in this?
Well, before the speech, I'll do some bantering, but once the speech gets going, I think I'm going to be yelling at the TV most of the time. So,
what do you think? What do you hear tonight?
I'm just looking for him to have another solid speech. I mean, when he did his joint address, all the time he's on the top. If he can stay disciplined, I think he's going to have a solid speech, and I think people are going to like what they hear.
Two seasoned hands. Do these speeches matter, particularly for President Trump, when you know that what's going to happen the next day is unpredictable?
I do, because I think it, again, he has to show he's disciplined, that he's got a good, strong message, and I think he does. I mean, I think the economy, I think he can really sell that. I'm a little concerned about some of the immigration part. I don't want him to oversell some of this because I don't want him to hurt the base and the turnout in the midterms. So I think there's going to be a lot of positive things he can talk about. I think he's going to have to be very careful on negotiating the immigration aspect of it.
And the Democrat we're going to see tonight in response, Congressman Joe Kennedy. You know a little about that family. What should we expect from this very young congressman making his debut on a national stage?
To be clear, I worked for his uncle for 13 years. I've only met him once or twice, but I've been watching him very closely since he's come to Congress. And by all accounts, he's doing a great job. What do I expect? I expect him to try and get out of this without doing any damage to his popularity in the weeks and months to come. This is by far the worst job in politics. I've done 2 of these in the past, and also a response regarding George Bush and the Iraq War. These are no-win situations. You're up against the magisterial grandiosity of a president. Even this president giving a speech before the House of Representatives. You just can't win, so he's in there to try and make some points and get out as quickly as possible.
And we'll look for that just after the president finishes. Jim Manley, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Go Twins. Let's go back now to Cecilia Vega, our White House correspondent. She is covering this back over at headquarters, and I don't know if Cecilia can hear me. If she is, there she is. She's in front of the White House. Cecilia, you've been following this all day.
I want to know how you got the bar assignment and I got the bureau assignment. What the heck?
Well, it's tough duty over here, but I got to say we're only drinking water for the record, Cecilia. But it's exactly right. But give us a sense of what this president is planning to say tonight. They say it's going to be an optimistic speech. What do you think?
Yeah, and Devin, I'm told by sources in the White House that really President Trump played a big role going into this and gave specific instructions to his aides who are helping him write this speech. He said, I want this to be optimistic. I want this to be positive. I want this to be about bridging the American divide. So the word of the night, I'm told from White House aides that I've been talking to, is optimism. We know that he's had a number of top aides on his staff in his inner circle working closely on the speech for months and weeks leading up to it, really. Names, and these names will give you a sense of where the president is going to go tonight, right? His economic advisor, Gary Cohn, his national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, and then the big name, the household name, is Stephen Miller, the president's senior policy advisor, who is really a hardliner when it comes to immigration. Those are going to be 3 of the big themes that President Trump has hit. Now, the White House in the last few hours has released some excerpts to give us an advance, a little bit of a sneak preview of what this president is going to talk about tonight, because really until just recently, I'd been told that very few people in the president's own inner circle, Devin, had even seen the full copy of this speech. It's really been kept a tight secret over at that White House. But the big phrase that President Trump is going to roll out tonight, according to these excerpts, is the new American moment. He said that there has never been a better time to start living the American dream, and And you know this, Devin, from covering this White House as well as I do. The White House aides are calling this must-see TV. This is a president who knows a lot about primetime television, so I think you're going to get some of that tonight.
He loves the primetime moments. Cecilia, you know that better than anybody. You're legendary, by the way, a living legend on Twitter, at Cecilia Vega. Everybody should go and follow her, our star White House correspondent. Before we let you go, Cecilia, I just have to ask you real quick, do you think this is going to make a difference, his teleprompter speech? It's been so acrimonious in the lead up to this moment.
Well, certainly the White House and the top aides there are hoping that he gets this bounce from this big speech tonight that he saw in the wake of his first address to Congress a year ago. You know, you will remember that people said that speech was the most presidential Donald Trump had ever been up to that point, leading off of the inauguration and off of that brutal campaign. And he had rave reviews off of that speech, and they had this period where the White House was really floating high on that. How long did that period last? All of 3 whole days, until the president got on his phone and started tweeting about these allegations that President Obama wiretapped him. So President Trump may very well be his best and worst critic and enemy in the wake of this speech. Will he do well tonight? I think he will. The man certainly knows how to put on a primetime show, and he can very much read a teleprompter. The big question facing this White House is what is going to happen tomorrow morning when the president is back in the West Wing and in the residence, and he's got his phone in his hands. Only time will tell.
All right, senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega, thank you. Good luck tonight. And of course, Rick, and Tara, we are certainly hitting refresh on that Twitter feed. We know people here are already talking about the tweets that will come potentially tomorrow as well. We know someone else who is fantastic on Twitter and monitoring Twitter on Mary Bruce over on Capitol Hill, the senior congressional correspondent for ABC News. Mary's been, of course, following the lead up to this whole thing. Mary, talk to us about the Congress that the president's going to address tonight. It's pretty divided.
Divided indeed. Look, the president is going to be speaking tonight before one of the most bitterly partisan and divided Congresses we've ever seen. And it comes in the midst of these tumultuous debates over immigration reform, over a spending deal. Remember, we have another government shutdown looming. And the president's role has been such a key factor in all of these debates. Now, we know the president is going to try and strike a more bipartisan tone here as he tries to strike a deal with Democrats. And look, he really has no choice. He has to get Democrats on board going forward if he wants to get anything done here on the Hill. So you know, but that's a lot easier said than done, especially given the looming 2018 midterms, guys.
Flip those second and third ones. And Mary, you've been tracking today how the various members and constituencies are planning to make their divergent views known. We're hearing about all different sorts of movements, pins, special clothing that folks are wearing, some even boycotting. Give us the lay of the land on that today. Record numbers of boycotts?
Yeah, and the opposition from the other party, the president will be able to see when he simply looks out into the crowd. You have at least 8 members of Congress who have said they're boycotting this event entirely because of their opposition to some of the president's recent remarks, that rather provocative comment he made about immigrants from African countries. You're also going to see lots of members of Congress likely dressed all in black. That is meant to show their support and solidarity for the Me Too movement. You're going to see lots of people with those pins on as well. There are some movements afoot to have what was formerly known as date night here, where you see some members of Congress sitting with members of the other party. But overall, when the president looks out into the crowd, he's going to see a lot of different voices from the opposition. And one thing, guys, you know, one of the things that we always watch for in this event are what are known around here as the aisle hogs. Those members of Congress that show up early, who for years have waited along the sides of the aisle to have that picture, that moment of them shaking the president's hand as he walks down the aisle. Well, several of those famous Democratic aisle hogs, we're told, did not make the move this year. They decided not to come early to stake out that key position. Tells you something about the tenor up here on Capitol Hill.
All right, our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, thank you so much. Good luck tonight, and we will be checking back with you a little bit later. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just tuning in, by the way, we're here at the Hawk and Dove up on Capitol Hill in Washington. Rick Klein, political director, Tara Palmieri, our White House correspondent. This is what it looks like in Washington on Capitol Hill on State of the Union night. It's a big deal. And everyone is here on these big monitors behind us. We'll be tuning in with President Trump. Rick, Tara, we just heard from Mary. Such a divided Congress, divided country, of course, that the president's talking to, but he's got so much going for him with the jobs created, record stock market, ISIS is on the run. Let's break down some of the numbers that are not in his favor.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be weaving a story about America on the march, but if you look at his numbers, these poll numbers are absolutely dismal. I mean, historically bad. 36% approval rating coming in tonight in our latest ABC News Washington Post poll. To give it some context, you go back 72 years. The entire history of modern polling, going back to Harry Truman, there's never been a president 1 year into his presidency with numbers this low. That's very bad. I mean, you look at it right there, that big black bar at the end, 58% disapproval. You go back to even presidents that had a really rough time, people that weren't even reelected, like George H.W. Bush. He had a very high approval rating. Recent presidents, you go across the board. This has got to be frustrating for this White House because they're just seeing numbers that are stubbornly stuck in the 30s.
It's because his political agenda and his strategy for the past year has been to appeal to his base, but there just aren't quite enough of them to move past that 36% mark, and that is what's happened. But you've seen a turnover in the White House, and never before have you seen, personnel equaling policy as much as in this White House. A lot of the hardliners have left, like his former strategist Steve Bannon, and a lot of the people that worked with him. And the president seems to be trying to take a more moderate tone. And even on immigration, he said today that he feels that he has to be softer. And that's something that they've really tried to push because they realize that to get this Democratic Congress along with them on immigration, on the budget, the wall, and on infrastructure, they need to unite.
And real quick, Rick, before we move on, even in spite of the bad approval rating numbers, there are some indications that things are stabilizing for Trump. Voters liking the tax cuts a little bit more. But he's still not getting a lot of credit for how good the economy is.
You guys want a secret? This is the number that could determine the midterm elections right here, because obviously the economy is doing very well. If it were to continue to do well, who gets the credit? Right now, this drives President Trump nuts, because right now, Barack Obama is getting the credit of half of voters in our latest poll, and only 34% are saying that this tax law is actually a good thing for the country. The critical number here, again, 34%. That's a very bad number. He has to turn that around. And with half of the country saying that even the good economic news belongs credit due to Barack Obama, he's got to turn that around. And it means making an aggressive case. As the president knows how to sell something, he's going to begin making that sales pitch tonight.
And we're beginning to see, you're seeing live pictures of the arrivals inside the House chamber now. We're seeing members of the administration joining in. There are some of the seat grabbers along the aisle. Paul Ryan, of course, at the dais. And inside the chamber for us, joining by phone, Mr. Jonathan Karl, the chief White House correspondent and a good friend and colleague. And John, we're seeing the vice president walk in now. Give us the scene from inside the room.
All right, and I'm going to use my golf broadcaster voice in here because I'm positioned in the visitors gallery right above the House floor. Really one of the truly unique seats that I've ever occupied in covering American politics. Here is the Union address under President Bush, President Obama, and now President Trump. And this is, this is. We had one last year. Obviously, as you guys have discussed, it wasn't officially a State of the Union address. It was a speech to the joint session. This is his first official State of the Union address, and having spent some time around the president over the last week or so, my sense is that he's feeling good. The White House keeps telling us this is going to be an optimistic and energetic speech. There you have the Senate coming in. It's kind of, are you guys watching the live feed? It's always kind of an interesting.
Yeah, we can see the VP there with Paul Ryan. Now, John Karl, thanks for letting you go and come back at you. Thanks so much, John, for dialing in. Rick and Tara, we're going to continue the conversation in a second, but so much of the speech tonight will be linked to in some way this immigration fight that's going on, whether it's the budget, the Dreamers. And we have some immigration guests here with us, some immigration advocates, some DACA recipients. We're going to talk to them now. Two of them, Lizia, and tell us your name.
Maria.
And Maria and Lizia are both DACA recipients, Dreamers at the center of this debate that's sort of consuming Washington tonight. Tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to hear and give us a sense of how optimistic you are or not about this fight that's going on right now to resolve the DACA issue.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to hear the president once again say that he wants legislation, that he needs it before March 5th, which is the deadline that he has set forward himself. So I want him to call on Congress to work together, to come up with something, and that he will sign it, and that it needs to be urgent. You know, a few weeks back, he had a meeting with many other members of Congress where he said that we need to take care of this issue. He was quoted saying that this needs to be a bill of love. So let's have Congress work together. There's already a number of bipartisan solutions out there. And let's have one of those things come to the floor, then go to the president's desk and have him sign it so that people like myself can finally live at peace in the country that we call home. And I just want to say that I'm optimistic. You know, we've had members on both sides of the aisle coming on support. 86% of the American public supports this issue, and they support a pathway to citizenship for people like myself.
And Lizia, as Maria was saying, so many people in this country do support protections for the Dreamers. It hasn't happened. How anxiety-inducing has it been for you during this tumultuous period while you're kind of at the center of this Washington debate?
Look, I think it's incredibly scary. I mean, my DACA expires in about 3 months, and every night I go to bed wondering what my future will look like, and every morning I wake up scared and wondering if there's going to be an announcement that day that will change the entire trajectory of my life. And so, you know, last week President Trump said that he wants to offer or come up with a plan that would allow 1.8 million Dreamers to earn citizenship, and the majority of Americans agree. And so I think Congress should listen to him. I think they should put a bill on his desk, have him sign it, and protect us so we can finally stop feeling uncertain and get the stability and the certainty that we deserve.
Lizzie and Maria, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a minute as we continue this, but for now we're going to go over to our ABC News contributor and good friend of the broadcast, Meghan McCain is joining us. She'll be on a little bit later as well. Meghan, great to have you here. I want to get your reaction to that. What we just heard from those Dreamers and this very personal fight that has been underway the past few weeks on immigration. Where do you think things stand right now on resolution for them?
Yeah, I think most of us who are waiting tonight are anxious to see whether or not the president brings up DACA, brings up Dreamers. This should have been an easy layup for him and Democrats, and one of the few points of bipartisan support on both sides. As the young woman just said, something like 84% of Americans support Dreamers and their pathway to citizenship. So I'll be certainly curious to see if he brings it up. I think immigration in general and border security, from my understanding, is going to be a big source and points coming up in the speech tonight. But, you know, I'm curious to see if we're going to be able to find any middle ground, because it should be something that both sides should easily come together on. It hasn't seemed to happen, you know, ending obviously with Chuck Schumer shutting down the government and ultimately getting nowhere.
And we know we could be facing that again with yet 9 more days until the government funding runs out again. Meghan, thank you. We're going to come back to you, but before we let you go, did want to ask about how your dad is doing. He's not going to be here tonight, unfortunately. Our thoughts are with him. Our thoughts are with you and your family. Please send him our best. How's he doing tonight?
He's doing good. He's watching ABC. Very exciting. They're in Sedona, Arizona right now. So thank you for asking. He's very disappointed not to be there tonight, but he is watching and he's getting strong and doing a lot of physical therapy, and he's looking forward to coming back to DC. So thank you very much.
Okay, Meghan, thank you very much. And we'll come back to you after the speech for your take. We appreciate it. Again, just to reset the scene here with Rick Klein, political director, Tara Palmieri, our White House correspondent from the Hawk and Dove up on Capitol Hill. And we're just now minutes away from the 2018 State of the Union address. President Trump set to give his first big moment in prime time. And out in the middle of the country, that's where we find our Amna Nawaz, who has been spending the day at Washington University in St. Louis, meeting with students of both parties, eager to hear their views on what they hope to hear from the president tonight and the state of affairs in this country. Let's go out to Amna and see what's going on. Amna.
Hey guys, we are still here in the fun room. We're watching your coverage. We've got you up on the screens. Everyone's watching on their phones and laptops too. But we've been talking a lot about the policies. We've been talking a lot about the big picture. We have to remember a lot of these hit home in a very personal way for so many folks here. I want to introduce you to someone. This is Lexi. Lexi, come join me right here. Lexi is a Missouri native. You are a sophomore, right?
Yes.
And you were mentioning that you really want to hear the president talk about health care tonight. Why?
Yes. My dad was in a debilitating car accident about 5 years ago, and he's depended on Medicare to cover many of the costs that he's experienced since then. And with the tax bill eliminating the tax penalty and effectively undermining the Affordable Care Act, rising drug costs as well as rising premiums for my family will greatly affect my dad's ability to receive the care that he needs. So I'm anxious to see if President Trump is going to follow up with a health care policy of his own or address the Affordable Care Act and how this new elimination of the tax penalty will affect health care in our country.
So what is it you want to hear him say tonight? What do you want to hear from the president?
I'd like to hear a structure for some sort of plan that he wants to direct towards Congress to navigate the elimination of the tax penalty because it will rise premiums. I'm anxious to see if there's any plan or any idea of how to mitigate these costs for families affected.
All right. Thank you, Lexi. Obviously, healthcare is something a lot of folks here have talked about, wanting to hear more about. People have talked about student loans, about foreign policy. I want to introduce you to Clayton as well. Clayton, we met earlier today. Clayton is a junior, that's right? Mm-hmm. And you're from Kansas City?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned, Mary Bruce was talking earlier about the government shutdown. That hit home for your family in a particular way. Tell me about that.
So my father has worked for the Social Security Administration for almost 30 years now, and so upon the recent shutdown, I was reminded of 2013, where my father was essentially like unemployed for 2 weeks because of the furlough. And so that just puts my family in a really precarious position because I go to this expensive private university. My sister's also in school. And I think about, as tragic as that's and hard hitting as that is for my family, people who are working for the government but don't have like a salary like my father, in an even more precarious position because there is no payback policy right now. So what I'm looking right now is how President Trump plans to work across party lines to make sure the government's doing this basic job of functioning and running as it's supposed to be.
So what do you want to hear him say tonight that you think will help get closer to that, so maybe avoid a government shutdown in the future?
I just want to hear a strategic plan about how he's going to plan to work with both parties and not just his base.
All right. That's it. That's the view here from Washington University in St. Louis. We're going to keep talking to a bunch of other students here, but for now, I'll throw it back to you guys in D.C.
All right, I'm Navaz out at Wash U. We appreciate that view from the middle of the country. There you see Paul Ryan, House Speaker, with Vice President Pence, now reading some of the announcements, the declarations. As look at that chamber, it is now full. That's the House chamber. Joint session, senators in there as well at this stage. We'll come back to that in a second, but for those of you joining us on the ABC News app, Facebook, Twitter, we appreciate it. We want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. We have a whole team, our political team, back at headquarters is responding and fielding your questions right now. Keep them coming. In fact, let's do a check-in now with our social media correspondent tonight, if you will. Kenneth Moten is back at the ABC News Bureau. Kenneth, tracking all the trends tonight. What are people talking about on social, Ken?
Devin, let's do this. It's State of the Union night here in America. And of course, when you got the Twitter president, you're going to have folks on Twitter and on Facebook commenting about this president and this first State of the Union. You said, hey, this is the Super Bowl of politics. Does that make you guys the play-by-play? And that means I'm the stats guy, right? I'm analyzing things. Hey, social media, we're going to have some fun tonight, and we're already hearing from people because we want to hear from you. As you can see, take a couple of steps back with me here, and I can show you that we are already hearing from people. They are sounding off on this president for his first State of the Union address. When I say we want to hear from you, we want to hear from you. We want your questions. We want to know what issues are important to you. We want to know what's going on in your life that you want to hear from President Trump in this first address. Sherry? She's already on it because she says, looking forward to this first State of the Union address, I will actually enjoy and believe, brag about those economic facts. Mr. President, you deserve the credit. But then you've got other folks like Glenn who attacking the Democrats, saying you liberals will be crying tomorrow when your Democratic Party gets exposed tonight. But you've got Cindy down here who says, who cares? All this man does is lie. I don't think he knows how to speak the truth, and he only cares about the rich and himself. There are some folks who say, and when I say some, I mean a lot of folks who are sounding off on social media who who say they will not tune into the State of the Union address tonight. So we're monitoring all of that. Again, we want to hear from you on all our ABC News platforms. So come back to us. We want to hear from you. Devin, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks, Ken, so much. And we're just looking at live pictures right now. The president coming out of the south lawn of the White House. He is now in the Beast. What a great picture that is. Take a look there. Those lights illuminating the inside. You see John Kelly, I think, is in there as well. The First Lady, Tara Palmieri, is not in the limousine, which is somewhat unusual.
Right. It's a very rare sight to see the president going down Pennsylvania Avenue without having his partner, the First Lady, sitting next to him. We know that she decided at the last minute to have a reception with some of the guests and that she would be going on her own. Obviously, this comes at a very tense time for the president. Lots of reports about, infidelity before the elections, and a lot of people are looking at her and saying all eyes are on her. At the same time, she's taking a very prominent role in this actual speech by sitting with the guests and really embracing the speech and what it's about.
And she'll be up in the First Lady's box, where a lot of the president's guests make a symbolic point. It's a tradition that goes back to Ronald Reagan to bring, quote-unquote, real people who tell the story of the presidency, and she'll be right alongside a lot of those people. And they are stark stories that the president is trying to tell about illegal immigration and gang violence and the like.
That's right. Some wounded veterans among them, as you said, Rick, some families of victims from the MS-13 gang and others. And you saw a quick shot of them there on our feed. Members starting to fill up those seats. We're looking live picture inside the House chamber now, just about, I think, about 15 minutes away. 10 minutes away now from the president's speech. And Rick, give us some color here.
Well, right now we're looking at a lot of men in dark suits. There's a lot of women wearing dark as well. You'll see a good number of women even wearing black. Last year, a year ago, the president's first address to his joint session of Congress, they wore white in honor of suffragettes. This year, it's black, and it's in honor of the Me Too movement and trying to make a point about sexual harassment and sexual assault in a chamber where it's hit very real and close to home. You had 3 members of Congress resign just in December due to the sexual allegations that started to emerge as part of that movement. So I feel like it's been felt in a very real way, and I think it's a bit of a silent protest for the women in the audience tonight, maybe talking about President Trump as well.
And one of the things that our senior congressional correspondent Mary Bruce was mentioning earlier, a number of Democrats have invited very provocative guests to sit in their seats up in the gallery, among them Dreamers. You're looking at a live picture of Hope Hicks, the president's communications director, Sarah Sanders, of course, Kellyanne Conway, kind of hanging out there, Tara, in the back of the room, waiting for the president to come in.
Very prominent women in the Trump White House.
I mean, that is the interesting thing about the Trump White House, that he really does have a lot of very prominent women in super senior roles. His entire press operation is run by women. Kellyanne Conway is one of his top advisors, and it's interesting because he even writes in his book, The Art of the Deal, that he likes actually working for women. He respects them in a lot of ways. So that's sort of the dichotomy of this presidency. And you also see them probably scoping out the scene. Like you said, there are protesters, there are all types of characters, and are they going to maybe break protocol and interject? And that's really what we're all kind of waiting for, right?
I would say, I mean, it's a powder keg atmosphere in Washington in general. We're here at a bar, everyone's having a good time. And you'd expect everyone to display some kind of decorum in the room, but they say about boxers sometimes going into fight, these guys just don't like each other. There's a lot of that in the room. These are Democrats who really feel like President Trump is debasing the office.
Right.
And even the Republicans in the room who are there to support the president, they feel like there's this vast conspiracy that the institutions of Washington are geared against.
And we know that Nancy Pelosi, Democratic leaders have encouraged their members not to make a scene tonight. Everyone remembers the famous Joe Wilson "You Lie" moment when he yelled at Barack Obama. Tonight we're told they've been instructed formally not to play that game. Although who knows?
Their guests?
Who knows? They've got a whole bunch of guests. And there you see, in fact, one of the other new protest symbols this year are those African stoles. Forgive me, I don't know the official name, but again, reference, Tara, to that very vulgar moment in the Oval Office not too long ago.
It's really interesting, too, that his office is promoting the idea that this is a speech of unity, which it traditionally is. The President of the United States, when he does the State of the Union, he says, I am President of all of you, and this is the agenda going forward. And it's usually not too much of a divisive speech. But we have to remember that the tides may turn in the midterms, and President Trump will likely need these same Democrats after 2018 to get his infrastructure plan across. And the truth is that they might be willing to go along with it. So it doesn't hurt for him to put together a speech that wins over their constituencies as well.
That's right. And paying attention to the two men that stand behind the president, the vice president, who's the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Of course, Paul Ryan could have been that one chair over if he had won with Mitt Romney, so there's all kind of intriguing pieces there.
Yeah, right.
But he may not be in that seat that much longer. Democrats very confident about their prospects right now, and the idea of a Democratic House and/or Senate, a game changer for Washington.
You're watching live picture now of inside the House chamber. The theme of the speech tonight, building a safe, strong, and proud America. According to the White House, going to be optimistic, going to run about an hour. They tell us the president has been spent the day rehearsing the speech. We know he's done a couple of run-throughs in the map room at the White House. The First Lady, as we just saw, is not in the presidential limousine traveling with the president, although we're looking at the Second Lady there, Karen Pence, just coming into the gallery. We were told earlier today that Melania Trump was meeting with her guests separately from the president, somewhat unusual, but always a moment for the First Lady as well. There's Karen Pence. And Rick, talk to us a little bit about the political implications of the president's message. This is a speech they're billing as a bipartisan olive branch. But it's not clear that Democrats are really going to want to play along with Republicans on some of these issues headed into a midterm.
Yeah, look, the idea of a Trump pivot, I think we can all agree it ain't going to happen, right? So think about this as a Trump pause, a moment where he can kind of message a little bit differently. But is it going to be a game changer? Is it going to change the way that he approaches legislation? There's a lot of skepticism in that room. We start to see the funding deadline for government. That's just 9 days away. You could run out of funding for the entire government. The Dreamers are stuck in limbo with their deadline coming up in the first week of March. Plus the Mueller investigation and the footsteps getting louder just about every day. We could see new information coming out even tonight, perhaps. So all of these things are extraneous to the room, but I think they're undeniable factors when you look at the dynamics there, is that there's a lot of noise happening around this White House.
And also, a lot of these lawmakers and lobbyists and foreign leaders, they actually hang on every single word that the president says in a State of the Union speech. But we're in a really kind of unique situation in the sense that we've seen this president say one thing, tweet another, not even just do another. So can they really trust that the words that are coming out of his mouth, that they are going to actually project policy and the positions that he'll have in the future?
That's right. The global implications of the speech can't be forgotten. A lot of world leaders and governments watching this speech tonight. If you have questions about the speech, by the way, please send them in on social media. We're watching for your questions on Facebook, on Twitter, on the ABC News app. Watch us on abcnews.com. Of course, we're also on Roku. We're on Apple TV. We're on Xbox. You can find us there. Tell your friends, or better yet, come out and join us here at the Hawk and Tub up on Capitol Hill. We got quite the crowd tonight. They're about to put the speech up on the big screens behind us. But right now we're about 7 minutes away, and there you were seeing some members of the president's family. Very soon we expect the Sergeant of Arms to announce the First Lady will be coming into the chamber. That's who we're waiting for next. And here's Steve King, big immigration hardliner. Of course, he's been against the president's plan.
You look and see if what he's standing for and what he's sitting for. You can pretty much tell what the president's saying based on that because of his hardline stance. I do think that immigration issue hangs over this entire speech because you have this very real deadline looming for the so-called Dreamers. You got the president contradicting himself, frankly. So any language he has on that, and the border wall, that key campaign promise he said a year ago in his speech to the joint session that there would begin construction on that border wall. Of course, we're not there yet.
And we know that this border wall is really more of a political symbol than anything else. So we shouldn't expect him to really budge on that, and we should expect to hear more about it in a way.
It looks like here come the justices of the Supreme Court. We know that a number of justices are there tonight. There's Chief Justice John Roberts, Stephen Breyer, Elena Kagan, two of the more liberal members of the court. And there in the back there, the fourth justice who's attending tonight, Justice Gorsuch, the appointee that President Trump made early in his term to replace Antonin Scalia, the late Antonin Scalia.
Still one of the undeniable high points of this presidency from a conservative perspective.
Conservatives very happy with the pick of Justice Gorsuch. Tara, a number of justices choosing to be conveniently absent tonight, among them Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, is overseas at an event there, so she won't be attending. and we're getting very close now to the speech, minutes away. The president's cabinet is coming up next. And Rick, we've also learned this evening who the designated survivor will be.
Not Scott Pruitt.
Yes, no, not after today's comments. No, Scott Pruitt.
One member who will not be
No,
there.
it's Sonny Perdue, the agriculture secretary. You know, it's so fascinating. I've talked to a couple of cabinet members who've been in that position, and a lot of them don't even know what hits them. Literally, they get just whisked away into a safe location to be in storage. And for that couple of hours, you're the most important person in the world, almost, maybe, perhaps, and then you go back to real life, and you just got to get dropped off wherever you are, and they go back to reality. It's got to be straight. Of course, there's an ABC show of some success by the same name, but it is a bizarre, I guess, critical tradition. But yeah, it stops the moment of anonymity for one of these members of the cabinet.
That's right, and one can imagine the types of things they're dining on right now, feet up on the table, steak and lobster.
They get to eat what they want, we think.
That's
yes.
right. It's a secluded location, but it doesn't mean they can't have a good time. They're welcome here at the Hawk and Dove, actually.
Why
Sonny
not?
Perdue, if you're watching, come on over and join us.
Safe space.
Tonight. Let's just do a quick reset for folks who are just tuning in ahead of the president's speech here at the top of the hour. Rick Klein, our political director, Kero Palmieri, White House correspondent. I'm Devin Dwyer, head of the Pennsylvania Avenue unit here at ABC News. Thank you for joining us. All of our social platforms tonight. We want to hear from you. Hope you're sending us your comments and your feedback. Kenneth Moten over in the ABC News Bureau is tracking all of that. We'll come back at him just in a little bit. But right now, you are looking at a live picture inside the House chamber tonight. Where our Jonathan Karl is. We'll check back in with him a little bit later, but he's in those seats with the laptops right above the dais, trying to get a view. Rick, a lot of these members camped out hours ahead of the speech to get a seat on the aisle so that they can shake the president's hand.
Yeah, they're called the aisle hogs, and there's a long tradition of doing it. You know, you don't get to just put down a placard, and they're very, very careful about the rules here. They say you have to physically be in the seat, so that means showing up hours early, right after the security sweep, and keeping that out, all for that one picture, so you can get the handshake, so you can be on national television. Interestingly, a lot of people
send their interns. They
can't do that. They can't do that. Elliot Engel, the congressman from New York, a lot of people know him from the mustache, was the most infamous aisle hog going back more than 2 decades. But in his very liberal district in New York City, maybe that picture with President Trump isn't worth as much. He doesn't do it anymore. So we don't see Elliot Engel any longer. But a lot of Republicans in particular, they want that handshake. They want that moment.
And we know this is a president that relishes the moment, relishes the handshake, relishes the personal contact. In fact, maybe more than any other president, this is one who would remember if you actually sat there and caught his arm on the way in.
Exactly. It could actually lead to a deal because, you know, President Trump makes it such a personal experience with all lawmakers, and he really is, according to his aides, looking right now to find a partner on the Democratic side. You know, he's hoping that his agenda on infrastructure is something that can really bring them together. And Chuck Schumer today had an op-ed in the Washington Post, you know, just criticizing the president's plan, which hasn't really been unveiled quite yet. But this is a moment, and he's going to play up the infrastructure plan because he knows that's something that both sides will want to get behind this.
One of the other things we've heard from the White House today, as you're looking at Bernie Sanders, their senator from Vermont, waiting on the speech tonight, is that the president will speak from the heart. It was something we heard repeatedly tonight, Rick. And real quick, before we wrap up, Tara, the president, in fact, told a group of reporters this afternoon that it's one of the things that has changed him while in office. He's realized that the job takes heart. Somewhat surprising from this president.
Well, he's used to money, and that's the business background. I think maybe some gut as well. I do think that's a stark admission about how the office changes you, about how public policy changes you, and I think a lot of people will be looking to see that heart on display tonight.
You see the First Lady now walking in to her gallery with her guests. Melania Trump, as is tradition. And Tara, we've been saying
last year she wore black, and this year she's wearing white. So.
And some were speculating if she was going to wear black and perhaps send a message in solidarity with those other women.
She was criticized last year for her outfit. The sequins, it was a black sequin outfit, and they thought it wasn't appropriate. This is a beautiful, appropriate outfit.
The stage is set. The room is full. The First Lady is in her seat. We're about to have a State of the Union address, folks. The president's first here in the nation's capital. Rick Klein, our political director, Kero Palmieri, White House correspondent, will be with you on the tail end of the speech, but we're getting ready to turn it over to George Stephanopoulos and the rest of the team here at the top of the hour for the president's State of the Union address as his cabinet is now about to come in. We hope you'll stick with us through the duration of the speech. Come with us back on the backside. Send us your questions along the way. We'll field them. We've got much more on the back end. We're going to hear some more folks here in the bar. We're going to hear from the rest of the team. And we hope to hear from you tonight.
President Trump's first State of the Union starts now.
This is an ABC News special. Just 1 year ago,
we will look back on tonight as when this new chapter of American greatness began.
For many, it was a year of much progress.
I came to Washington for you. Your dreams are my dreams. The unemployment rate is at now an 18-year low.
The biggest tax cut of all time.
The stock market is hitting one all-time record after another. The newest member of the United States Supreme Court. I don't believe that any president has accomplished as much as this president.
For others, a year of disruption and a presidency unlike any other.
There is absolutely no collusion. Rocket Man, we are building a wall. Very fine people on both sides. He's fired. He's fired.
Now, tonight, what will his message be to a divided Congress and polarized America?
Finally, we are putting America first.
Live from the nation's capital, the State of the Union address and the Democratic response. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening and welcome to ABC's live coverage of President Trump's first State of the Union. What a year it has been. It's been a year of conflict and controversy, both for President Trump and the country he now leads. It's been exciting and exhausting, unusual in so many ways, with a president unlike any we've seen before. Tonight, it turned to tradition. Trump's chance to put his stamp on the year past and set the agenda for the year ahead in this most formal setting. And that was the moment, just moments ago, when the First Lady, Melania Trump, came in. As has become the tradition, she'll be surrounded by the president's guests today. And we're surrounded by our entire political team here tonight. I want to go to our chief White House correspondent, John Karl, in the House chamber adjacent to the First Lady. And John, the president clearly going to take a victory lap tonight, take credit for the strong economy and the tax that he thinks is going to make it stronger. But he's also entering this chamber with the lowest approval rating of any modern president 1 year in. So he's going to promise a new American moment. And White House officials say the speech is going to be both optimistic and inclusive. Those are not words, the first words that come to mind when you think of Trump's first year.
Right. I mean, the theme he has tonight is unity, but he is entering a chamber that is as divided as it has ever been during our lifetimes anyway, George. I mean, I was here during the Clinton impeachment, and this feels even more divided than it was then. Many Democrats here in this chamber see the president as not merely somebody they disagree with, but somebody who is a danger to the republic. And then you have Republicans in this chamber who talk about this deep state conspiracy within the FBI to thwart this president. But the president's theme here will be optimism in the Trump worldview. America is back. Stock market is roaring. We're in the midst of an historic rally there. Unemployment is down. And thanks to his tax cuts, American companies are handing out bonuses.
That really turned the corner for the president at the end of the year. And Mary Bruce, our senior congressional correspondent, also in the House tonight over in Statutory Hall. That's the big accomplishment for the majority in the House, in the Senate, the majority of the Republicans. Also, they got that Supreme Court justice. But now, many Republicans fear they're going to lose this majority because of the backlash against President Trump.
George, polls show this president is deeply unpopular, and so far we've seen his party is paying the political price in recent special elections. The GOP majority here is now on the line, and so while the president tonight may try to strike more of an optimistic tone, a bipartisan tone, as he tries to strike deals on everything from immigration to infrastructure to a spending deal, because the reality is he needs Democrats now in order to get anything done, in order to get his agenda through. But George, Democrats, they are already eyeing November, and they hope eyeing retaking the majority.
As the president has said many times, he now needs 60 votes to get anything done. So as you said, John Karl, healing the divide is going to be a big theme of the president. Tonight, also here with World News anchor David Muir. And David, we were at the White House today with the president. He talked about healing this divide. Also, it was interesting, towards the end of that lunch, he talked about what he learned as president this year, learned he has to work with heart and soul. Yeah, different from business.
Absolutely, because he campaigned on being a businessman, obviously, but he said a lot of the skills you learn as a businessman he's brought to the White House with him. And he said you really do what's best for almost purely monetary reasons when you're a businessman. You make your money, you're competing against people you often don't like, you want to win. But he said that in what is normally an off-the-record moment with anchors from all the different networks. And he said, I have learned that it takes heart and compassion to govern.
Here comes the Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving. He will introduce the president.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And the president will now work his way down the aisle. Many members of Congress looking for that grip and grin as he makes his way down. Matthew Dowd, we're talking about those members of Congress looking for a second with the president. You got about 20 minutes with the president today alone. After we were having lunch, he actually called you in for a meeting and reinforced this theme here that we've been talking about.
Yeah, the White House reached out this morning and had asked if I could have a meeting at the Oval Office, and it was the president. It was a one-on-one meeting with the president and I. And I emphasized to the president, as we've all talked about, and I said to the president, the country is as divided as it's ever been in our history, and he is the president of the United States, and he needs to do something about that. But I told him it's going to take more than just a speech tonight, and he understood the importance of the speech. It's going to take a series of actions in the follow-up aftermath of this speech. He seemed to understand that how divided the country is and that he needs to step up.
And Cecilia Vega, our senior White House correspondent, one of the issues that's going to be front and center tonight, immigration, that sort of speaks to that divide. It's divided Democrats and Republicans. It's divided different regions of the country. And the president has seemed to be of a divided mind on this as well, sometimes talking about compromise, sometimes taking quite a hard line on immigration.
And that has been exceptionally frustrating, George, for the people trying to negotiate a deal with him. Remember, Mitch McConnell said negotiating with Schumer said negotiating with Donald Trump has been negotiating with Jell-O. The clock is ticking on this Congress and this White House to pass a deal, to pass a budget, and to save these dreamers, as many would say. He needs the Democrats to do this. We are told that immigration will be a big focus tonight. We also know that among the main speechwriters who helped the president on this speech is Stephen Miller, his senior advisor who helped write this speech. You know, immigration has been a real test for this president. This is the president, the art of the deal president, who so far has been unable to reach a deal on immigration. His big selling point, the wall, still not funded, pushing for that deal, George.
It has bedeviled presidents before as well. George W. Bush could not get a bipartisan immigration deal either, nor could President Obama. The theme division, Byron Pitts, anchor of Nightline. The president hoping the economy is the glue that holds people together as we see him work his way up to the podium. He talks about lowest black unemployment in years, but Charlottesville on many minds. Also those comments he made about African
deal on immigration is big.
For many people in this country, they don't believe not only that this president is not for them, they believe that he's against them. You talk about those employment numbers. Yes, historic. Lowest they've ever been for African Americans. But consider this. This is the slowest
organizations to raise awareness and calls its drivers everyday heroes for their unique position to help. The move comes on the heels of Kern County supervisors announcing that January was Human Trafficking Awareness Month and urging people to report suspicious activity. In a news release on Monday, Uber said its new efforts will make it easier for drivers to report suspicious behavior to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. A recent study estimated there were more than 40 million adults and children affected worldwide in 2016. We are only halfway through the flu season, which has killed nearly 100 people across the country, and Walmart is looking to keep people healthy by offering flu shots. Walmart stores across Bakersfield have been offering flu shots to help protect families from the potentially deadly virus, which officials say is the worst in years. More than a dozen people were out at the Walmart in Rosedale this morning to get a flu shot. The Centers for Disease Control says more than 30 children have died from the flu across the country, and getting a flu shot can help protect them from contracting the illness. Earlier this year, a local mother of 5 died following complications from the flu. Will be held from 9 to 4. And if you weren't able to make it out to Walmart for their clinic, due to the severity of the season, the shots will be available not just for kids, but for adults. The clinic will be held from 9 to 4. Send things over to Trixie's outfield here. Take a look at due to the severity of the season, the shots will be available not just for kids, also for adults as well. We're going to send things over to Twitter ABC's Allison Gargo. Take a look at our weather.
Hanging out was gorgeous today. We actually had a high of 70 degrees. We're actually a little bit though, already starting to cool, so we're still in Bakersfield, but we did see those high thin clouds hanging out across the county today. So right now pretty warm, but as we begin to clear up, we're actually looking at temperatures in those 60s up in the Cranberry Valley. But as we do head into tomorrow and those clouds are starting to clear, we're going to be at a high of 65, but then slowly moving back up to 70 in those 60s up in the Cranberry Valley. But as we do head into tomorrow and those clouds,
well, it's time again for a local school district to celebrate and honor its former students. But first, they need nominees. Bakersfield City School District is now. It's time again for a local school district to celebrate and honor its former students. Since its inception in 2010, the Hall of Fame Bakersfield City School District is now accepting nominations for inductees and community members who have distinguished themselves. Since its inception in 2010, the Hall of Fame has recognized inductees include Kevin McCarthy, for their former mayor Harvey Hall, and community members who have distinguished themselves by making nominations March 2nd to submit Hall of Fame inductees. Visit www.bcsd.Hall, Dolores Huerta, and more. The local high school has announced a new addition to their staff. To submit nominations, visit www.bcsd.com. Ryan Dignan, the local high school has announced a new addition to their staff. Teacher and head basketball welcoming a brand new athletic teaching and coaching experience. Ryan Dignan assumed his new role today and will continue in his current role as teacher and head basketball coach. A statement about him is that he will be an asset as our athletic director. He has an impressive overall vision for the future of our officials with Garces High. Understands the statement about him is that he will be an asset as our athletic director. He has an impressive restaurant is putting the finishing touches on their new Southwest location and is preparing to hire new workers within the next month. La Costa Morisco, the local restaurant, is putting the finishing touches on their new Southwest location and is preparing to hire new workers starting in February. Those interested, La Costa Morisco is set to open and begin new locations inside the old. The interview process will begin shortly after that March. We have a link with more details on the upcoming hiring process and new location on the website invitations. The interview process will coming up. You may want to look in the sky with more details on the upcoming hiring process. A link on our website. Coming up, you may want to look in the sky early tomorrow morning to see what NASA is calling a lunar fire startup.
Action Sports is ready to make you happy. All snow clothing is on sale. Patagonia, Solomon, Nissan, Mills, Skiers, Virgin Ride, and 686 for Borders. California's largest bicycle show. Action Sports is ready to make you happy. All snow clothing is on sale. Patagonia, Solomon, Nissan, Mills, Skiers.
The new Speakeasy Restaurant, a dining experience like no other. Stop by for lunch or dinner, savor from our many delicious meals and appetizers, and enjoy our new Speakeasy Restaurant. Speakeasy Restaurant now open like no other. Stop by for lunch or dinner, savor from our many delicious meals and appetizers, and enjoy our full bar. Speakeasy Restaurant now open at the new 1933 Event Center on Downing Avenue.
Racing to the rescue with the efficient to save people.
Tires, Tires and Wheels with 3 locations to serve.
Devastating.
And welcome back. President Trump is addressing the nation tonight in his first State of the Union address. The address will look to the coming year, focusing on immigration. And welcome back. President Trump is addressing the nation tonight in the past year we've faced challenges. The address will look to the coming year, focusing on immigration. We do want to listen in live as we see him already saying that in the past year we've faced challenges that we expected and ones that we could never imagine. We do want to listen in live as we see him at the podium. Go ahead and take a listen in. We do want to listen in live as we see him at the podium. Go ahead and take a listen in.
Ashley was aboard one of the first helicopters on the scene in Houston during the Hurricane Harvey. Through 18 hours of wind and rain, Ashley braved live power lines and deep water to help save more than 40 lives. Ashley, we all thank you. Thank you very much. We heard about Americans like firefighter David Dahlberg. He's here with us also. David faced down walls of flame to rescue almost 60 children trapped at a California summer camp threatened by those devastating wildfires. to everyone still recovering in Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, everywhere, we are with you, we love you, and we always will pull through together, always. Thank you to David and the brave people of California. Thank you very much, David. Great job. Some trials over the past year touched this chamber very personally. With us tonight is one of the toughest people ever to serve in this House, a guy who took a bullet, almost died, and was back to work 3.5 months later, the legend from Louisiana, Congressman Steve Scalise. I think they like you, Steve. We're incredibly grateful for the heroic efforts of the Capitol Police officers, the Alexandria Police, and the doctors, nurses, and paramedics who saved his life and the lives of many others, some in this room. In the aftermath, yes. In the aftermath of that terrible shooting, we came together, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as representatives of the people. But it is not enough to come together only in times of tragedy. Tonight, I call upon all of us to set aside our differences, to seek out common ground, and to summon the unity we need to deliver for the people. This is really the key. These are the people we were elected to serve. Over the last year, the world has seen what we always knew, that no people on earth are so fearless or daring or determined as Americans. If there is a mountain, we climb it. If there's a frontier, we cross it. If there's a challenge, we tame it. If there's an opportunity, we seize it. So let's begin tonight by recognizing that the state of our union is strong because our people are strong. And together we are building a safe, strong, and proud America. Since the election, we have created 2.4 million new jobs, including 200,000 new jobs in manufacturing alone. Tremendous numbers. After years and years of wage stagnation, we are finally seeing rising wages. Unemployment claims have hit a 45-year low. And something I'm very proud of, African American unemployment stands at the lowest rate ever recorded. And Hispanic American unemployment has also reached the lowest levels in history. Small business confidence is at an all-time high. The stock market has smashed one record after another, gaining $8 trillion and more in value in just this short period of time. The great news for Americans, 401k, retirement pension, and college savings accounts have gone through the roof. And just as I promised the American people from this podium 11 months ago, we enacted the biggest tax cuts and reforms in American history. Our massive tax cuts provide tremendous relief for the middle class and small business. To lower tax rates for hardworking Americans, we nearly doubled the standard deduction for everyone. Now the first $24,000 earned by a married couple is completely tax-free. We also doubled the child tax credit. A typical family of four making $75,000 will see their tax bill reduced by $2,000, slashing their tax bill in half. In April, this will be the last time you will ever file under the old and very broken system, and millions of Americans will have more take-home pay starting next month, a lot more. We eliminated an especially cruel tax that fell mostly on Americans making less than $50,000 a year, forcing them to pay tremendous penalties simply because they couldn't afford government-ordered health plans. We repealed the core of the disastrous Obamacare. The individual mandate is now gone. Thank you. We slashed the business tax rate from 35% all the way down to 21%, so American companies can compete and win against anyone else anywhere in the world. These changes alone are estimated to increase average family income by more than $4,000. A lot of money. Small businesses have also received a massive tax cut and can now deduct 20% of their business income.
Users may not be who
Here
you think.
tonight
Many live
are
seemingly
Steve
normal-
Staub and Sandy Keplinger of Staub Manufacturing, a small, beautiful business in Ohio. They've just finished the best year in their 20-year history. Because of tax reform, they are handing out raises, hiring an additional 14 people, and expanding into the building next door. Good feeling. One of Staub's employees, Corey Adams, is also with us tonight. Corey is an all-American worker. He supported himself through high school, lost his job during the 2008 recession, and was later hired by Staub, where he trained to become a welder. Like many hardworking Americans, Corey plans to invest his tax cut raise into his new home and his 2 daughters' education. Corey, please stand.
Easy Side Tech.
And he's a great welder. I was told that by the man that owns that company that's doing so well. So congratulations, Corey. Since we passed tax cuts, roughly 3 million workers have already gotten tax cut bonuses, many of them thousands and thousands of dollars per worker, and it's getting more every month, every week. Apple has just announced it plans to invest a total of $350 billion in America and hire another 20,000 workers. And just a little while ago, ExxonMobil announced a $50 billion investment in the United States, just a little while ago. This, in fact, is our new American moment. There has never been a better time to start living the American dream. So to every citizen watching at home tonight, no matter where you've been or where you've come from, this is your time. If you work hard, if you believe in yourself, if you believe in America, then you can dream anything. You can be anything. And together, we can achieve absolutely anything. Tonight, I want to talk about what kind of future we're going to have and what kind of a nation we're going to be. All of us together as one team, one people, and one American family can do anything. We all share the same home, the same heart, the same destiny, and the same great American flag. Together, we are rediscovering the American way. In America, we know that faith and family, not government and bureaucracy, are the center of American life. The motto is, "In God we trust." And we celebrate our police, our military, and our amazing veterans as heroes who deserve our total and unwavering support. Here tonight is Preston Sharp, a 12-year-old boy from Redding, California, who noticed that veterans' graves were not marked with flags on Veterans Day. He decided all by himself to change that and started a movement that has now placed 40,000 flags at the graves of our great heroes. Preston, a job well done. Young patriots like Preston teach all of us about our civic duty as Americans. And I met Preston a little while ago, and he is something very special that I can tell you. Great future. Thank you very much for all you've done, Preston. Thank you very much. Preston's reverence for those who have served our nation reminds us of why we salute our flag, why we put our hands on our hearts for the Pledge of Allegiance, and why we proudly stand for the national anthem. Americans love their country, and they deserve a government that shows them the same love and loyalty in return. For the last year, we have sought to restore the bonds of trust between our citizens and their government. Working with the Senate, we are appointing judges who will interpret the Constitution as written, including a great new Supreme Court justice and more circuit court judges than any new administration in the history of our country. We are totally defending our Second Amendment and have taken historic actions to protect religious liberty. And we are serving our brave veterans, including giving our veterans choice in their health care decisions. Last year, Congress also passed, and I signed, the landmark VA Accountability Act. Since its passage, my administration has already removed more than 1,500 VA employees who failed to give our veterans the care they deserve. And we are hiring talented people who love our vets as much as we do. And I will not stop until our veterans are properly taken care of, which has been my promise to them from the very beginning of this great journey. All Americans deserve accountability and respect, and that's what we are giving to our wonderful heroes, our veterans. Thank you. So tonight I call on Congress to empower every cabinet secretary with the authority to reward good workers and to remove federal employees who undermine the public trust or fail the American people. In our drive to make Washington accountable, we have eliminated more regulations in our first year than any administration in the history of our country. We have ended the war on American energy, and we have ended the war on beautiful, clean coal. We are now very proudly an exporter of energy to the world. In Detroit, I halted government mandates that crippled America's great, beautiful auto workers so that we can get Motor City revving its engines again, and that's what's happening. Many car companies are now building and expanding plants in the United States, something we haven't seen for decades. Chrysler is moving a major plant from Mexico to Michigan. Toyota and Mazda are opening up a plant in Alabama, a big one, and we haven't seen this in a long time. It's all coming back. Very soon, auto plants and other plants will be opening up all over our country. This is all news Americans are totally unaccustomed to hearing. For many years, companies and jobs were only leaving us. But now, they are roaring back, they're coming back, they want to be where the action is, they want to be in the United States of America. That's where they want to be. exciting progress is happening every single day. To speed access to breakthrough cures and affordable generic drugs, last year, the FDA approved more new and generic drugs and medical devices than ever before in our country's history. We also believe that patients with terminal conditions, terminal illness, should have access to experimental treatment immediately that could potentially save their lives. People who are terminally ill should not have to go from country to seek a cure. I want to give them a chance right here at home. It's time for Congress to give these wonderful, incredible Americans the right to try. One of my greatest priorities is to reduce the price of prescription drugs. In many other countries, these drugs cost far less than what we pay in the United States, and it's very, very unfair. That is why I've directed my administration to make fixing the injustice of high drug prices one of my top priorities for the year. And prices will come down substantially. Watch. America has also finally turned the page on decades of unfair trade deals that sacrificed our prosperity and shipped away our companies, our jobs, and our wealth. Our nation has lost its wealth, but we're getting it back so fast. The era of economic surrender is totally over. From now on, we expect trading relationships to be fair and, very importantly, reciprocal. We will work to fix bad trade deals and negotiate new ones, and they'll be good ones, but they'll be fair. And we will protect American workers and American intellectual property through strong enforcement of our trade rules. As we rebuild our industries, it is also time to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. America is a nation of builders. We built the Empire State Building in just 1 year. Isn't it a disgrace that it can now take 10 years just to get a minor permit approved for the building of a simple road? I am asking both parties to come together to give us safe, fast, reliable, and modern infrastructure that our economy needs and our people deserve. Tonight, I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs. Every federal dollar should be leveraged by partnering with state and local governments and, where appropriate, tapping into private sector investment to permanently fix the infrastructure deficit, and we can do it. Any bill must also streamline the permitting and approval process, getting it down to no more than 2 years and perhaps even 1. Together, we can reclaim our great building heritage. We will build gleaming new roads, bridges, highways, railways, and waterways all across our land. And we will do it with American heart, American hands, and American grit. We want every American to know the dignity of a hard day's work. We want every child to be safe in their home at night. And we want every citizen to be proud of this land that we all love so much. We can lift our citizens from welfare to work, from dependence to independence, and from poverty to prosperity. As tax cuts create new jobs, let's invest in workforce development and let's invest in job training, which we need so badly. Let's open great vocational schools so our future workers can learn a craft and realize their full potential. And let's support working families by supporting paid family leave. As America regains its strength, opportunity must be extended to all citizens. That is why this year we will embark on reforming our prisons to help former inmates who have served their time get a second chance at life. Struggling communities, especially immigrant communities, will also be helped by immigration policies that focus on the best interests of American workers and American families. For decades, open borders have allowed drugs and gangs to pour into our most vulnerable communities. They've allowed millions of low-wage workers to compete for jobs and wages against the poorest Americans. Most tragically, they have caused the loss of many innocent lives. Here tonight are 2 fathers and 2 mothers, Evelyn Rodriguez, Freddie Cuevas, Elizabeth Alvarado, and Robert Mickens. Their 2 teenage daughters, Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens, were close friends on Long Island. But in September 2016, on the eve of Nisa's 16th birthday, such a happy time it should have been, neither of them came home. These 2 precious girls were brutally murdered while walking together in their hometown. 6 members of the savage MS-13 gang have been charged with Kayla and Nisa's murders. Many of these gang members took advantage of glaring loopholes in our laws to enter the country as illegal, unaccompanied alien minors and wound up in Kayla and Nisa's high school. Evelyn, Elizabeth, Freddie, and Robert, tonight everyone in this chamber is praying for you. Everyone in America is grieving for you. Please stand. Thank you very much. I want you to know that 320 million hearts are right now breaking for you. We love you. Thank you. While we cannot imagine the depths of that kind of sorrow, we can make sure that other families never have to endure this kind of pain. Tonight I am calling on Congress to finally close the deadly loopholes that have allowed MS-13 and other criminal gangs to break into our country. We have proposed new legislation that will fix our immigration laws and support our ICE and Border Patrol agents. These are great people. These are great, great people that work so hard in the midst of such danger so that this can never happen again. The United States is a compassionate nation. We are proud that we do more than any other country anywhere in the world to help the needy, the struggling, and the underprivileged all over the world. But as President of the United States, my highest loyalty, my greatest compassion, my constant concern is for America's children, America's struggling workers, and America's forgotten communities. I want our youth to grow up to achieve great things. I want our poor to have their chance to rise. So tonight I am extending an open hand to work with members of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, to protect our citizens of every background, color, religion, and creed. My duty, and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber, is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too. Here tonight is one leader in the effort to defend our country, Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent Celestino Martinez. He goes by DJ and CJ. He said, call me either one. so we'll call you CJ. Served 15 years in the Air Force before becoming an ICE agent and spending the last 15 years fighting gang violence and getting dangerous criminals off of our streets. Tough job. At one point, MS-13 leaders ordered CJ's murder, and they wanted it to happen quickly. But he did not cave to threats or to fear. Last May, he commanded an operation to track down gang members on Long Island. His team has arrested nearly 400, including more than 220 MS-13 gang members. And I have to tell you, what the Border Patrol and ICE have done, we have sent thousands and thousands and thousands of MS-13 horrible people out of this country or into our prisons. So I just want to congratulate you, CJ. You're a brave guy. Thank you very much. And I asked CJ, what's the secret? He said, we're just tougher than they are. And I like that answer. Now let's get Congress to send you, and all of the people in this great chamber have to do it. We have no choice. CJ, we're going to send you reinforcements, and we're going to send them to you quickly. It's what you need. Over the next few weeks, the House and Senate will be voting on an immigration reform package. In recent months, my administration has met extensively with both Democrats and Republicans to craft a bipartisan approach to immigration reform. Based on these discussions, we presented Congress with a detailed proposal that should be supported by both parties as a fair compromise, one where nobody gets everything they want, but where our country gets the critical reforms it needs and must have. Here are the 4 pillars of our plan. The first pillar of our framework generously offers a path to citizenship for 1.8 million illegal immigrants who were brought here by their parents at a young age. That covers almost 3 times more people than the previous administration covered. Under our plan, those who meet education and work requirements and show good moral character will be able to become full citizens of the United States over a 12-year period. The second pillar fully secures the border. That means building a great wall on the southern border, and it means hiring more heroes like CJ to keep our communities safe. Crucially, our plan closes the terrible loopholes exploited by criminals and terrorists to enter our country, and it finally ends the horrible and dangerous practice of catch and release. The third pillar ends the visa lottery, a program that randomly hands out green cards without any regard for skill, merit, or the safety of American people. It's time to begin moving toward a merit-based immigration system, one that admits people who are skilled, who want to work, who will contribute to our society, and who will love and respect our country. The fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration. Under the current broken system, a single immigrant can bring in virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives. Under our plan, we focus on the immediate family by limiting sponsorships to spouses and minor children. This vital reform is necessary not just for our economy, but for our security and for the future of America. In recent weeks, 2 terrorist attacks in New York were made possible by the visa lottery and chain migration. In the age of terrorism, these programs present risks we can just no longer afford. It's time to reform. These outdated immigration rules and finally bring our immigration system into the 21st century. These 4 pillars represent a down-the-middle compromise and one that will create a safe, modern, and lawful immigration system. For over 30 years, Washington has tried and failed to solve this problem. This Congress can be the one that finally makes it happen. Most importantly, these 4 pillars will produce legislation that fulfills my ironclad pledge to sign a bill that puts America first. So let's come together, set politics aside, and finally get the job done. These reforms will also support our response to the terrible crisis of opioid and drug addiction. Never before has it been like it is now. It is terrible. We have to do something about it. In 2016, we lost 64,000 Americans to drug overdoses, 174 deaths per day, 7 per hour. We must get much tougher on drug dealers and pushers if we are going to succeed in stopping this scourge. My administration is committed to fighting the drug epidemic and helping get treatment for those in need, for those who have been so terribly hurt. The struggle will be long and it will be difficult, but as Americans always do, in the end, we will succeed, we will prevail. As we have seen tonight, the most difficult challenges bring out the best in America. We see a vivid expression of this truth in the story of the Holetz family of New Mexico. Ryan Holetz is 27 years old, an officer with the Albuquerque Police Department. He's here tonight with his wife, Rebecca. Thank you, Ryan. Last year, Ryan was on duty when he saw a pregnant, homeless woman preparing to inject heroin. When Ryan told her she was going to harm her unborn child, she began to weep. She told him she didn't know where to turn, but badly wanted a safe home for her baby. In that moment, Ryan said he felt God speak to him. "You will do it because you can." He heard those words. He took out a picture of his wife and their 4 kids. Then he went home to tell his wife, Rebecca. In an instant, she agreed to adopt. The Holetz named their new daughter Hope. Ryan and Rebecca, you embody the goodness of our nation. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan and Rebecca. As we rebuild America's strength and confidence at home, we are also restoring our strength and standing abroad. Around the world, we face rogue regimes, terrorist groups, and rivals like China and Russia that challenge our interests, our economy, and our values. In confronting these horrible dangers, we know that weakness is the surest path to conflict, and unmatched power is the surest means to our true and great defense. For this reason, I am asking Congress to end the dangerous defense sequester and fully fund our great military. As part of our defense, we must modernize and rebuild our nuclear arsenal, hopefully never having to use it, but making it so strong and so powerful that it will deter any acts of aggression by any other nation or anyone else. Perhaps someday in the future, there will be a magical moment when the countries of the world will get together to eliminate their nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, we are not there yet, sadly. Last year, I also pledged that we would work with our allies to extinguish ISIS from the face of the earth. 1 year later, I am proud to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has liberated very close to 100% of the territory just recently held by these killers in Iraq and in Syria and in other locations as well. But there is much more work to be done. We will continue our fight until ISIS is defeated. Army Staff Sergeant Justin Peck is here tonight. Near Raqqa last November, Justin and his comrade, Chief Petty Officer Kenton Stacy, were on a mission to clear buildings that ISIS had rigged with explosive so that civilians could return to that city, hopefully soon and hopefully safely. Clearing the second floor of a vital hospital, Kenton Stacy was severely wounded by an explosion. Immediately, Justin bounded into the booby-trapped and unbelievably dangerous and unsafe building and found Kenton, but in very, very bad shape. He applied pressure to the wound and inserted a tube to reopen an airway. He then performed CPR for 20 straight minutes during the ground transport and maintained artificial respiration through 2.5 hours and through emergency surgery. Kenton Stacy would have died if it were not for Justin's selfless love for his fellow warrior. Tonight, Kenton is recovering in Texas. Raqqa is liberated, and Justin is wearing his new Bronze Star with a V for valor. Staff Sergeant Peck, all of America salutes him. Terrorists who do things like place bombs in civilian hospitals are evil. When possible, we have no choice but to annihilate them. When necessary, we must be able to detain and question them. But we must be clear, terrorists are not merely criminals. They are unlawful enemy combatants. And when captured overseas, they should be treated like the terrorists they are. In the past, we have foolishly released hundreds and hundreds of dangerous terrorists, only to meet them again on the battlefield, including the ISIS leader, al-Baghdadi, who we captured, who we had, who we released. So today, I'm keeping another promise. I just signed, prior to walking in, an order directing Secretary Mattis, who is doing a great job. Thank you. To re-examine our military detention policy and to keep open the detention facilities in Guantanamo Bay. I am asking Congress to ensure that in the fight against ISIS and al-Qaeda, we continue to have all necessary power to detain terrorists wherever we chase them down, wherever we find them. And in many cases, for them, it will now be Guantanamo Bay. At the same time, as of a few months ago, our warriors in Afghanistan have new rules of engagement. Along with their heroic Afghan partners, our military is no longer undermined by artificial timelines, and we no longer tell our enemies our plans. Last month, I also took an action endorsed unanimously by the U.S. Senate just months before. I recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Shortly afterwards, dozens of countries voted in the United Nations General Assembly against America's sovereign right to make this decision. In 2016, American taxpayers generously sent those same countries more than $20 billion in aid. That is why tonight I am asking Congress to pass legislation to help ensure American foreign assistance dollars always serve American interests and only go to friends of America, not enemies of America. As we strengthen friendships all around the world, we are also restoring clarity about our adversaries. When the people of Iran rose up against the crimes of their corrupt dictatorship, I did not stay silent. America stands with the people of Iran in their courageous struggle for freedom. I am asking Congress to address the fundamental flaws in the terrible Iran nuclear deal. My administration has also imposed tough sanctions on the communist and socialist dictatorships in Cuba and Venezuela. But no regime has oppressed its own citizens more totally or brutally than the cruel dictatorship in North Korea. North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear missiles could very soon threaten our homeland. We are waging a campaign of maximum pressure to prevent that from ever happening. Past experience has taught us that complacency and concessions only invite aggression and provocation. I will not repeat the mistakes of past administrations that got us into this very dangerous position. We need only look at the depraved character of the North Korean regime to understand the nature of the nuclear threat it could pose to America and to our allies. Otto Warmbier was a hard-working student at the University of Virginia. and a great student he was. On his way to study abroad in Asia, Otto joined a tour to North Korea. At its conclusion, this wonderful young man was arrested and charged with crimes against the state. After a shameful trial, the dictatorship sentenced Otto to 15 years of hard labor before returning him to America last June, horribly injured and on the verge of death. He passed away just days after his return. Otto's wonderful parents, Fred and Cindy Warmbier, are here with us tonight, along with Otto's brother and sister, Austin and Greta. Please. Incredible people. You are powerful witnesses to a menace that threatens our world, and your strength truly inspires us all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Tonight, we pledge to honor Otto's memory with total American resolve. Thank you. Finally, we are joined by one more witness to the ominous nature of this regime. His name is Mr. Ji Sung-ho. In 1996, Sung-ho was a starving boy in North Korea. One day he tried to steal coal from a railroad car to barter for a few scraps of food, which were very hard to get. In the process, he passed out on the train tracks, exhausted from hunger. He woke up as a train ran over his limbs. He then endured multiple amputations without anything to dull the pain or the hurt. His brother and sister gave what little food they had to help him recover and ate dirt themselves, permanently stunting their own growth. Later, he was tortured by North Korean authorities after returning from a brief visit to China. His tormentors wanted to know if he'd met any Christians. He had, and he resolved after that to be free. Sung-ho traveled thousands of miles on crutches all across China and Southeast Asia to freedom. Most of his family followed. His father was caught trying to escape and was tortured to death. Today, he lives in Seoul, where he rescues other defectors and broadcasts into North Korea what the regime fears most, the truth. Today, he has a new leg, but Sung-ho, I understand you still keep those old crutches as a reminder of how far you've come. Your great sacrifice is an inspiration to us all. Please, thank you. Sung Ho's story is a testament to the yearning of every human soul to live in freedom. It was that same yearning for freedom that nearly 250 years ago gave birth to a special place called America. It was a small cluster of colonies caught between a great ocean and a vast wilderness. It was home to an incredible people with a revolutionary idea that they could rule themselves, that they could chart their own destiny, and that together they could light up the entire world. That is what our country has always been about. That is what Americans have always stood for, always strived for, and always done. Atop the dome of this Capitol stands the Statue of Freedom. She stands tall and dignified among the monuments to our ancestors who fought and lived and died to protect her. Monuments to Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and King. Memorials to the heroes of Yorktown and Saratoga. To young Americans who shed their blood on the shores of Normandy and the fields beyond, and others who went down in the waters of the Pacific and the skies all over Asia. And freedom stands tall over one more monument, this one, this Capitol, this living monument. This is the monument to the American people. We're a people whose heroes live not only in the past, but all around us, defending hope, pride, and defending the American way. They work in every trade. They sacrifice to raise a family. They care for our children at home. They defend our flag abroad. And they are strong moms and brave kids. They are firefighters and police officers and border agents, medics and Marines. But above all else, they are Americans. And this Capitol, this city, this nation belongs entirely to them. Our task is to respect them, to listen to them, to serve them, to protect them, and to always be worthy of them. Americans fill the world with art and music. They push the bounds of science and discovery, and they forever remind us of what we should never, ever forget. The people dreamed this country. The people built this country. And it's the people who are making America great again. As long as we are proud of who we are and what we are fighting for, there is nothing we cannot achieve. As long as we have confidence in our values, faith in our citizens, and trust in our God, we will never fail. Our families will thrive. Our people will prosper. And our nation will forever be safe and strong and proud and mighty and free. Thank you, and God bless America. Good night.
President Trump wrapping up his first State of the Union. It was a long one. Hour and 20 minutes, a little over an hour and 20 minutes. Not the longest ever. Bill Clinton has that record. President repeating some of his signature lines, saying the American people are making America great again. Says the era of economic surrender is over. Says he wants an immigration policy that puts America first. Came into this chamber today promising to try to heal the divides in America, bring America together. We're going to find out in the coming days what America thought about that. First, want to go inside the chamber, though, as the president works his way back to John Karl, who was there for it all. One thing's pretty clear, John, he did not unify that chamber tonight.
George, I've never seen anything like it. Right now, the Democrats have basically run for the exits. I mean, usually when the president leaves, you still have members applauding. He did not unify this chamber, particularly on the issue of immigration. Not a single Democratic applause on his immigration proposal.
Yeah, and Mary Bruce, our senior congressional correspondent, that struck me as well. This is supposed to be the big bipartisan compromise, the president laying out what he called a compromise in the speech. That is not what Democrats heard, and you could hear the audible groans when he was talking about his pillars in the immigration plan.
Exactly, George. A fair compromise is how the president may be describing the plan that he's outlined, but that is certainly not how Democrats see it. And even members of the president's own party have objections to this deal. Look, this is the most pressing issue facing Congress right now, and it took the president about 45 minutes to address it. There is a urgent, looming deadline here, and Republicans and Democrats are no closer to solving this. And, George, you have to think about those dozens of dreamers in the audience tonight. What they are thinking as they hear the president talk about this, as they see the divisions there on the floor, concerned that they could face deportation come the beginning of March, and what the dreamers were thinking when they heard the president say that line that will likely be one of the most memorable lines of this speeches when he said, Americans are dreamers too.
Americans are dreamers too. Senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega, we heard a lot of it. We heard that line. We also heard a lot about the dangers of unenforced borders from the president today. Echoes of his announcement speech back in June of 2015.
Exactly. One of the things that he said, though, George, is that that he wants to set the country to set aside our differences, and he wanted to summon unity. And then he went on, as you mentioned, to talk about undocumented immigrants as MS-13 gang members, demonizing them. I think he's going to have a tough sell when he's trying to sell this issue of unity and bringing up this issue of undocumented immigrants as criminals for a lot of people, particularly those dreamers in that room that Mary was saying. And also, again, sort of stoking, I think many would say, racial tensions by bringing up this issue of kneeling during the national anthem. The headline out of the speech for me, George, though, is, of course, that, quote, Americans are dreamers, too. I think many people will see this as clear, concise, and compassionate from this president.
And Meghan McCain from The View also joining us tonight. Did you hear any avenues of bipartisan compromise tonight, or was this more the president who is deciding to stick with his base?
It was actually surprisingly not as bipartisan as I had anticipated. As Cecilia just said, talking about kneeling or standing for the national anthem, his commitment to the Second Amendment, emphasizing in God we trust. Those are all things that will certainly make his base happy, but not necessarily something I anticipated in this kind of State of the Union speech. Like I said, it was a lot more divisive than I had originally anticipated, but I'm sure conservatives will be very happy tonight.
Matthew, did the president deliver what he talked to you about earlier today?
Well, what I was thinking as I was listening to the speech is if the president met with me after the speech, I would say to him, well, that was how not to give a unifying speech. So let's go back and give the unifying speech. As everybody has mentioned, he mentioned Obamacare, the ending of Obamacare, divisive. Mentioned the tax cuts, divisive. Mentioned a whole rift on immigration, divisive, and the national anthem, divisive. Calling this a healing speech is almost like going on a diet by drinking a Diet Coke and eating a pizza. That's as much of a healing speech this was.
David, the president sounded like he meant it when he said it.
He really did. And, to this point, it'll make conservatives happy. But I was thinking about all the voters, George, that we just talked to in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. We went in particular to districts where it was less than 1% the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And then when we were at that lunch today at the White House, and I asked him, what will he say to the people who are still not convinced he hasn't brought any more people into the fray in many of the places that we talked to them? And he said, I would consider it a great achievement if we could make our country united. That's what he told us today, if I could unite this country. But as you could see in that chamber tonight, Democrats rarely standing, and certainly not on any of the policy proposals, not even on infrastructure, George, which is something the Democrats have talked long about as well.
Martha Raddatz, he did try to get bipartisan support for his national security policies, for supporting the troops, I should say.
That's an easy one, for supporting the troops. You're going to get applause for that whenever you do it. It was also just a particularly gloomy speech. I mean, he didn't mention the word carnage, but he talked a lot about carnage. It was a sad speech there at the end, and did not unify exactly what everybody is saying about not unifying. The Democrats are there. They represent people in the country who probably feel exactly the way they do.
Chris Christie, are we missing something here?
Yeah, I think, it was a traditional State of the Union speech, which means it was put together by a whole group of people who everybody wanted to have their little bit in, and I thought it was too long. But in the end, George, I would disagree with Martha and some of the others on this. The Democrats were not standing for anything. Nothing. Even the things that everybody could be unified on, they didn't stand on. The fact of the matter is, they're in 2018 midterm election war footing. Now, the president could have done some things differently, could have shortened it, got a bigger and more unifying theme. But in the end, I don't know if they would have even stood up then. That was a pretty glum-looking group of Democrats all through the evening.
Cokie Roberts, was that a mistake for the Democrats?
Well, they probably should have been somewhat more enthusiastic when the president came in. We haven't seen them not clapping for a president who enters the chamber. But he did do a variety of things that clearly did make them angry. And, talking about the standing for the national anthem, there were many African-American members of Congress there wearing kente cloth, the African cloth. The president never mentioned Africa, never said anything like that. So there was not anything there for them to relate to.
The president has left the chamber. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Democratic response with Congressman Joseph Kennedy.
Next, he's the grandson of liberal icon Bobby Kennedy and the grandnephew of President John F. Kennedy and Senator Ted Kennedy. 37-year-old congressman from Massachusetts, Joe Kennedy III. How will he respond? ABC News live coverage of the State of the Union and the Democratic response will continue in a moment.
And welcome back to Capitol Hill. I'm Devin Dwyer here at the Hawk and Dove Bar, just in a stone's throw away from the Capitol Dome. While we wait for the Democratic response from Congressman Joe Kennedy, we're joined here by a number of patrons of the Hawk and Dove. It was actually a pretty big crowd tonight, but Tara Palmieri, our White House correspondent, has been talking to folks here. And Tara, you have some reactions.
Right. I'm talking with Maria and Lizia, and I wanted to ask you, what did you think of the president's comment that Americans are dreamers too?
I think that it reinforces the fact that we need to pass legislation to protect folks like myself. It was painful to also have to hear him refer to me as an illegal alien when I had been pledging allegiance to a flag since I was 5 years old. And it was also painful to hear him use me as a bargaining chip to try to get some of the other pillars of his plan that he was referring to when, back in September, he said that we needed to get a DACA fix when he terminated the program. He never mentioned any of these other things that don't belong in this conversation. So I'm still hopeful that we will get somewhere, but we still need to continue to move forward, and Congress needs to act and put forward legislation for the president to sign.
Well, I think what the president laid out was some of the most drastic cuts to the legal immigration system that we've seen since the racial quota laws in the 1920s. And for me, it was really frustrating because my DACA expires in May. That's 3 months from now. And I don't think that a bill that broad has the ability to pass. It doesn't have that kind of support that we need in the House or the Senate. And so I hope that he will call on Congress to pass something more narrow and that we can get this done immediately. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my protections and I will get deported to a country that I barely know.
Do you think that the president stoked racial tension within the country? Do you, like you said, it was painful for you to listen to. Did you have similar feelings, or what was your feeling about how he framed the issue?
I mean, I think there was obviously a very negative slant towards immigrants. I think in this country, we know that for generations, immigrants have contributed to the fabric of our society, economically, socially, in so many different ways. Dreamers like me have been here for decades, and we want the chance to continue serving our communities. Thank you.
And we're hanging out here with Paul from Houston. Tell us what you do for a living.
I'm a United Methodist pastor.
United Methodist pastor. So what was your reaction to the speech watching it tonight?
It's pretty disappointing the way in which the president framed all Latin American immigrants as murderers and gangsters. Jesus was a refugee, was an immigrant who fled a terrorist, and so we worship a God who fled oppression in the way that many immigrants are fleeing oppression in their countries in Latin America. So it was disappointing.
So an interesting perspective all around. Thanks for joining us here, Paul. Appreciate it.
And we're about ready for the Democratic response to the State of the Union. We're going back to George and the gang now. Representative Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts is up next.
And we are back, about to get the Democratic response from Congressman Joe Kennedy from Fall River, Massachusetts. A third generation of Kennedys, the grandson of Bobby Kennedy. I want to bring in Stephanie Cutter, Democratic strategist, who's worked closely with the Kennedy family. As I said, a grandson of Bobby Kennedy, son of Congressman Joe Kennedy.
That's right. Congressman Kennedy has a strong reputation of being a workhorse, not a showboat, which, as you know, is unusual in Congress. He's very popular at home in Massachusetts. And I think what we'll see tonight is unlike what was billed for the president's speech, this will be a real unifying speech. That's what that's where his passion is, in bringing people together. He's solution-oriented. That's his reputation in Massachusetts, and I think we'll see it.
He will be speaking before a small crowd in Fall River, Massachusetts. Congressman Joe Kennedy coming up right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute privilege to join you all tonight. We are here in Fall River, Massachusetts, a proud American city. An American city built by immigrants. From textiles to robots, this is a place that knows how to make great things. The students who are with us here this evening in the auto tech program at Diamond Regional Technical School carry on that rich legacy. Like many American hometowns, Fall River has faced its share of storms. But the people here are tough. They fight for each other. They pull for their city. It is a fitting place to gather as our nation reflects on the state of our union. This is a difficult task. Many have spent the last year anxious, angry, afraid. We all feel the fractured fault lines across our country. We hear the voices of Americans who are forgotten and feel forsaken. We see an economy that makes stocks soar, investor portfolios bulge, and corporate profits climb, but fails to give workers their fair share of the reward. A government that struggles to keep itself open. Russia, knee-deep in our democracy. An all-out war on environmental protection. A Justice Department rolling back civil rights by the day. Hatred and supremacy proudly marching in our streets. bullets tearing through our classrooms, concerts, and congregations, targeting our safest, sacred places. And this nagging, sinking feeling, no matter your political beliefs, that this is not right. This is not who we are. Folks, it would be easy to dismiss this past year as chaos, and partisanship as politics. But it's far, far bigger than that. This administration isn't just targeting the laws that protect us. They're targeting the very idea that we are all worthy of protection. For them, dignity isn't something you're born with, but something you measure by your net worth, your celebrity, your headlines, your crowd size. Not to mention the gender of your spouse, the country of your birth, the color of your skin, the God of your prayers. Their record is a rebuke to our highest American ideal, the belief that we are all worthy, that we are all equal, that we all count in the eyes of our law and our leaders, our God and our government. That is the American promise. But today, ladies and gentlemen, today, that promise is being broken by an administration that callously appraises our worthiness and decides who makes the cut and who can be bargained away. They're turning American life into a zero-sum game where for one to win, another must lose, where we can guarantee America's safety if we slash our safety net, where we can extend health care in Mississippi if we gut it in Massachusetts. We can cut taxes for corporations today if we raise them on families tomorrow. Where we can take care of sick kids if we sacrifice dreamers. We are bombarded with one false choice after another: coal miners or single moms, rural communities or inner cities, the coast or the heartland. As if the mechanic in Pittsburgh, a teacher in Tulsa, and a daycare worker in Birmingham are bitter rivals, rather than mutual casualties of a system forcefully rigged towards those at the top. As if the parent who lies awake, terrified that their transgender son or daughter will be beaten and bullied at school, is any more or less legitimate than a parent whose heart is shattered by a daughter in the grips of an opioid addiction. So here is the answer that Democrats offer tonight. We choose both. We fight for both, because the greatest, strongest, richest nation in the world should not have to leave anyone behind. We choose a better deal for all who call our country home. We choose a living wage and a paid leave and affordable childcare your family needs to survive. We choose pensions that are solvent, trade pacts that are fair, roads and bridges that won't rust away, a good education that you can afford. We choose a healthcare system that offers you mercy, whether you suffer from cancer or depression or addiction. We choose an economy strong enough to boast record stock prices and brave enough to admit that top CEOs making 300 times their average worker is not right. We choose Fall River. We choose the thousands of American communities whose roads aren't paved with power or privilege, but with an honest effort, with good faith, and the resolve to build something better for your kids. That is our story. It began the day our founding fathers and mothers set sail for a new world, fleeing oppression and intolerance. It continued with every word of our independence, the audacity to declare that all men are created equal, an imperfect promise for a nation struggling to become a more perfect union. It grew with every suffragette step, every freedom rider's voice, and with every weary soul we welcome to our shores. And to all the dreamers out there watching tonight, let me be absolutely clear. Ustedes son parte de nuestra historia. Vamos a luchar por ustedes y no nos vamos a alejar. You are part of our story. We will fight for you, and we will not walk away. America, we carry that story on our shoulders. You swarmed Washington last year to ensure that no parent has to worry if they can afford to save their child's life. You proudly marched together last weekend, thousands deep, on the streets of Las Vegas and Philadelphia and Nashville. You sat high atop your mom's shoulders and held a sign that read, "Build a wall, and my generation will tear it down." You bravely say, "Me too." You steadfastly say, "Black Lives Matter." You wade through floodwaters, battle hurricanes, brave wildfires and mudslides to save a stranger. You battle your own quiet battles every single day. You drag your weary bodies to that extra shift so that your families won't feel the sting of scarcity. You leave loved ones at home to defend our country overseas, or patrol our neighborhoods at night. You serve, you rescue, you help, you heal. That, more than any law or leader, debate or disagreement, that is what drives us towards progress. Bullies may land a punch, they may leave a mark, but they have never, not once in the history of our United States, managed to match the strength and spirit of a people united in defense of their future. Politicians can be cheered for the promises they make. Our country will be judged by the promises we keep. That is the measure of our character. That is who we are. Out of many, one. Ladies and gentlemen, have faith. Have faith. The state of our union is hopeful, resilient, and enduring. God bless you. God bless your families. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Congressman Joe Kennedy with the Democratic response. We'll be right back with the final thought.
That cough doesn't sound so.
Hey, we're back at the Hawk and Dove up on Capitol Hill. There you had it. The Democratic response from Congressman Joe Kennedy, 37-year-old three-term congressman. Sort of a different response, a bit of a contrast the Democrats are putting up to Donald Trump. I'm joined here by Rick Klein, our political director, Tara Palmieri, our White House correspondent. A lot to unpack tonight. It was a big night here at the bar on Capitol Hill, but want to start by heading over to headquarters to Kenneth Moton, who's been tracking your reaction, the social reaction, those of you watching here on Facebook, on abcnews.com. We appreciate that. Glad you're with us tonight, Kenneth. What was the reaction on social?
Devin, I will say incredible reaction to the president's speech. We saw it on all sides, positive and negative. Big night for the nation, so no surprise. A lot of people jumped on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, commenting about the president's First State of the Union address. The big headline, I should tell you, Twitter says this was the most tweeted State of the Union or joint session ever, passing last year's record by at least 3 million. Of course, there are concerns about fake accounts or bots, but for now, it appears a lot of real people are talking, and they were searching during the president's speech as well. But if we go to Twitter right here, let's take a couple of steps back here, and I can show you that Sabina here, she sounded off pretty quickly. President Trump began his speech discussing the devastating effects of Hurricane Harvey, but neglected to mention the impacts that climate change has had on the severity and frequency of natural disasters. What will it take for science to be taken seriously by the White House? Number of people sounding off about the president's environmental status and what he's had to say. Look, reform the prisons. We know the president mentioned and outlined a plan for reforming the prisons, but Josh here asked, how about releasing marijuana-related nonviolent drug offenses? That's a good start. We know President Obama commuted the sentences of thousands of low-level offenders or drug offenders. President Trump, no such commutations from him on that point. Jeff here, overall, the State of the Union was pretty good, and I'm proud of President Trump. Nice work, Mr. President. Hopefully we can see more of you like this. So we saw some positive tweets from Trump supporters, but we saw a number of negative posts and tweets as well, and that's likely because of the president's record low approval ratings. But we're still getting some of that reaction in. We're looking at some trends from Google to see what were the big moments, the big questions, and the big issues people were talking about. Devin, I'm going to send it back to you.
All right, Kenneth, thanks so much. Thanks for staying on it through the night. We will come back to you in a little while. Guys, ahead of the speech, we knew that people were Googling searches for healthcare, immigration, a lot of interest in some of the topics that came up tonight. We know we want to go out real quickly to get reaction from the middle of the country now, and up here at the bar. Let's go out to Amna Nawaz out in Washington University in St. Louis. She's been getting the temperature of a bunch of students out there. Amna, what are you hearing? What do they like? What do they dislike?
Hey guys, a lot of reaction here in the room. They were all paying very close attention to what the president had to say. A lot of reaction we had to the conversation around immigration too. These were some of the things that mattered to a lot of the students here. One of them was Ruben. Ruben, come join me here. We spoke before the president delivered his address. You said you were going to pay close attention to what he had to say about immigration and DACA. So what do you think about what he said?
Well, I was really disappointed. I think the rhetoric he used really inspired fear, using grieving families to push for far-right, racist immigration laws was really disappointing, and insisting that Congress has to get his hardline policies in order to fix DACA, like he said originally, to help dreamers, because we're all descendants from immigrants, most of us, except for Native Americans. So it was really disappointing. It didn't unify the country, it just divided it more.
What about his plan for a pathway for citizenship for 1.8 million people? What do you think about that?
So I think it's important to get a pathway for citizenship, but I don't think that should be at the cost of building a wall or all the other kind of policies like ending the diversity lottery. I don't think that should be the cost. I think that should be the base that we build from.
Okay, and in this, just this room, we had a few students here where there was some diversity of opinion too. Obviously, a lot of discussion and some debate. I'm going to head over to the other side now. Walk with me now through all these various seating options here at Washington University. Blake joins us here, and Blake, thanks for joining me here.
Happy to be here.
You mentioned immigration as something that's important to you too. You wanted to see tougher language when it comes to border security. What did you think about what the president said?
Well, I thought a lot of President Trump's rhetoric was quite good. I mean, we definitely are a nation with lots of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. And definitely, I think also we need to build a wall. We need border security because he was showing examples. There are bad people coming into this country. Not all immigrants are bad, but we just need to make sure that we can have that border security, make sure our country's safe. And if we can come up with a compromise with the Democrats, I am all for that.
Did you hear anything new in there that made you think, okay, this is how this will move forward?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a pretty rocky road ahead with Republicans and Democrats. I'd like to see compromise, but, we'll just have to see what happens.
All right, let's head back over to the other side of the couch now. We're taking a little tour of Washington University's room up here. And I want to bring you in to the conversation we were having earlier with Nicholas. Now, Nicholas, you may have seen show up in your Twitter feed a few times because he was sending a number of questions. Thank you for doing that. But there was one in particular that caught my attention, and it was not about what we did hear the president say, but what we didn't hear him say. What was that question? You can send it over to our anchors now.
So, if I remember correctly, it was, what will President Trump have to say about the Me Too movement? Now, as we all know, the Me Too movement capped off in October. Very important for women's rights, for human dignity. For it not even to be referenced in the State of the Union speech is disrespecting to all of humanity.
Guys, I'll toss that back to you.
All right, Amna, that is an important question. Hold that thought. We want to take that question, but we're joined now quickly. We want to go to them. They were in the room. They were in the Capitol. Our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce, Chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl. There they are. Hey, guys. Greetings from the Hawk and Dove across town. Let's get your reaction to that speech that was...
Where's our invitation to the bar? So you guys are still
We want to get to business, and you guys want to have fun.
You can walk down here. We're just a few blocks away, guys. The lights are still on. And we're still going strong.
Water only over here.
This is sketchy. Well, I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but the one thing that struck us, if we can just hijack your show for a minute, is the fact that speech was almost the longest State of the Union address in televised history.
It went on and on and on.
And on.
And you were in the room. It was also, it seemed like, the most divided audience, at least that we've seen in a very long time. I mean, if you're just gauging by the applauses, I mean, we know it's the most divided Congress he's talked to in a while, but the room, not exactly a warm reception on both sides.
Well, you always see the left side, right side, the partisan applause, but this was different. I mean, for much of the speech, the Democrats were almost in this state of silent protest, either grimacing or expressionless, seated even to those lines about unity and we can win together and America's great. They were letting it known that they were not happy to be sitting there listening to this president. And then, Mary, I'm telling you, when that speech ended, they ran.
Yeah, because we're standing here, guys, in Statuary Hall where everyone, right now, it's this giant traffic jam of everyone trying to leave the Capitol. But, man, the Democrats just raced out of here.
So the president was still working his way down from the dais, coming down, and half of the chamber was completely empty. By the way, more than a few Republicans.
Yeah.
Look, it was late, okay? And we have Good Morning America in the morning. What's going on back there?
Well, we're going to try to keep you as long as possible then if you got to get up early. I'm telling you. Come on over, join us. We'll drink more than water after the show here. But
were you doing any drinking? Were you doing any drinking game there for the speech? I mean, what was Rick doing?
John Karl equals trouble.
We were hydrating a la Marco Rubio in his response. That's it. Nothing stronger than that, promise.
That's right.
I don't believe that.
What was your take of Congressman Kennedy, Mary?
I think, look, given the track record of these speeches, the way that they can really, we've seen them go pretty downhill pretty quickly. Look, he got through it relatively unscathed. I mean, these speeches can really sort of squelch your career or catapult it, and the stakes are high for Kennedy. beyond just his last name, he, like most who are chosen to give this speech, is a rising star. He's young, he's dynamic, he checks a lot of boxes for the Democratic Party, but also it's important to note he's not one of the Democrats eyeing a run in 2020, which was
maybe not yet.
Maybe depending on how the speech is received, but I think that was also important for Democrats too, to have someone who can represent the party but not be seen as someone who's trying to grab that mantle.
Yeah, no, he's impressive. He's one of the most impressive Democrats, I think, in Congress right now. He certainly is somebody that almost anybody you talk to here on the Democratic side will tell you this guy's got a future, whether it means a run for governor in Massachusetts or for the Senate or beyond. And it's a brutal assignment. It's an absolutely brutal assignment, but I thought he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, he pulled it off.
And John, before we let you go, you're one of the best political minds in town, but look in your crystal ball. Rick is going to come at me later for that one, but it's true. Where does
tells me that all the time, by the way.
Go from? Yeah. By the way, you should check these two guys out on Powerhouse Politics podcast. If you don't, go to Apple iTunes, subscribe, leave your feedback. We'll take it. It's a great podcast. New episode,
will you buy him a
emergency
drink for that, Rick? Buy him a drink for that. That's key.
That's right. I do collect paper snow. John, before we go, give us your read. Where does this go from here for the president? The next few days out in terms of their strategy. How is he going to play this one?
Well, I thought that one of the more troubling indicators of this was the section on immigration, which was the section that actually got a couple of rounds of boos and hisses and virtually no applause from anybody on the Democratic side. Obviously, the only way you get a deal on the Dreamers is with Democratic support. There was no indication in the chamber tonight that there is any receptivity whatsoever on the Democratic side of the aisle for his proposal on immigration. So I think that's going to be a very heavy lift, but you know, the Democrats blew it with the shutdown. So I think we have another...
And now there's another chance to redo that. We have another shutdown coming next Thursday if they can't somehow work this out as part of a spending bill. But look, I mean, the president...
But I don't think they're going to shut down this.
No, I think you're going to see another, little dribble of this ball down the field, another continuing resolution. But look, I mean, the president's outlined his proposal here. He called it a fair compromise. Not exactly how Democrats see it, not exactly how even many Republicans see it. I had one top Republican the other day tell me that if they are close to a bipartisan deal, if they are, it right now is being held together by spit.
Spit. Well, there you go.
That's my final thought.
Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl, our senior congressional correspondent Mary Bruce. You guys go get your beauty sleep. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Good luck.
We'll be hanging here if you change your mind. All right, come back over. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll pick up where we left off now with Amna Nawaz, our esteemed colleague out in the middle of the country, out at Washington University in St. Louis. She was meeting with a group of students there. And Tara, one of the students, just before we jumped over to the chamber, had asked a question about how the president was going to address the Me Too movement in his speech. There certainly wasn't an explicit mention of the Me Too movement, but he sort of alluded to it, perhaps.
He alluded to the fact that all Americans have rights and that, it doesn't matter your color, your gender, your religion. This was in the beginning of the speech when he was really painting these broad strokes of patriotic and really quite generalist types of talk about, a lot of language that's in our Constitution, that's on our dollar bills. And, those were really, really broad topics and things that you would expect people to clap for, Democrats at least, and to put them in a kind of uncomfortable situation until he really got down to the policy nitty-gritty, specifically immigration and the kneeling for the national anthem. Like, those are really divisive partisan issues. But before that, it was pretty broad. Me Too, Trump has never addressed Me Too. He comes under fire when that happens. I mean, he endorsed Roy Moore, who was a candidate in Alabama who was accused of molesting girls as young as 14. So do we really think that he's going to suddenly be, spearheading the Me Too movement? Not so much.
I think he views Me Too as the resistance, and I think it's been used as a motivating tool on the Democratic side, even though there's been bipartisan issues that have touched on Me Too. Look, he was asked the other day by Piers Morgan if he's a feminist, and he said, no, I'm not. I like women. I like also men. I like to advocate for everyone. I feel like it's an uncomfortable position for him to be put in, and again, there are bipartisan pieces of it, but you wouldn't expect him to talk that way. That's not Donald Trump.
In the big picture, let's take a step back now. The I think he's going to get pretty good marks for that speech. The president is good at giving these teleprompter speeches, sort of meeting the moment. But Rick, the Democrats were not buying any of it tonight.
I think he put forward a compelling vision of the presidency. It's just not necessarily his presidency. He was almost aspirational. This is the presidency that he would like to put forward. He would like to be representing. This is how he'd like to do the job. It isn't, though, how he's actually done the job, which is the point that Democrats made. And I think Tara's right. Look, there were a lot of lines in this that it was difficult for Democrats to sit on their hands for, because you talk about these broad strokes of patriotism and the flag. Yes, the Democrats and Republicans agree with all of that. They don't agree with this president. They don't agree with his handling of these issues. And they see a speech like this and they match it up against the actions of the last year and they say, wait a second, this just does not compute.
And what was the computing out at WashU, Amna? Did the rhetoric resonate with students there? The president sort of did meet that standard he set for himself about being optimistic, being forward-looking. I think by any objective measure, that was certainly a theme of this speech.
That's right. And there were actually a lot of folks in the room here who said that's exactly what they wanted to hear, was a unifying message. We're going to get to that in just a second. I did want to check back in with someone we talked to before the president even had a chance to speak. That was Lexi. We met her before the president's speech. It was a really personal story you shared with us about the fact that your father had been in an accident. You wanted to hear a plan from President Trump when it came to how he's going to mitigate health care costs. Did you hear anything that gave you hope in there?
I didn't hear anything that gave me concrete hope. He discussed how the elimination of the individual mandate was a win for the Republicans and for Americans, completely avoiding the fact that it was going to raise drug prices and premium prices. He then began to discuss how it's going to be a priority for his administration to lower drug prices without following that up with a concrete plan, and also ignoring the fact that much of his contributions come from pharmaceutical companies, and so it's less likely that he'll be able to negotiate for that. So I was disappointed because I didn't see any concrete reform or hope for my family.
And sitting right next to you here is Tyler, of course. And Tyler, you mentioned at the very top, tone mattered to you. You wanted to hear the president speak to all Americans, not just his base. What do you think? Did he deliver a unifying message?
Well, I think from what we mostly saw was that he talked in, very broad sentiments, right? And I'm not sure that's very helpful. And I think that, part of his speeches were simply about sort of point grabs for his base. So I really am not confident that he will be able to move forward from here. And I think we're going to see a lot of the same partisanship and the same gridlock that we've seen in the past year.
Man, so not a lot of hope in the room here. Let me take a quick pulse of the room, guys. Just hands up if you thought it was a unifying message tonight. Anybody? Anybody? There you have it. That is the view from right here at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Thanks to all of you guys for having us here, by the way, and I'll toss it back to you guys in D.C.
All right, Amna, thank you so much, and thanks to the whole crew out there. It was great to hear their perspective, and interesting to hear there at the end, Rick and Tara, that their view was that this was, in many ways, a divisive speech. There were certainly some lines that are catching fire on Twitter right now that all Americans, many Americans are dreamers, a reference, a jab to, of course, the Dreamers fight that we've been talking about. Let's go back to Kenneth Moton over at the ABC News headquarters. He's tracking all the social media trends right now. I'm sure he's seen some of those lines and themes from the speech that are popping. Kenneth, what are you seeing right now?
Devin, we just got some new numbers, some new information hot off the presses of Twitter and Google. Look behind me here. You can see the top search State of the Union address. According to our friends over at Google, we've got Bush down there at 2006, Obama 2015, Obama 2011, Obama 2010, and then President Trump 2018. A lot of people, supporters and critics of the president, online tonight Googling. We also saw at one point one of the Google trends was fact-checking. People wanted to fact-check this president, which is also no surprise, but sometimes we see some of the political rhetoric that goes back and forth on some of the issues that people want to check. Hey, I also have some new numbers in here. I'm going to read off my phone from Twitter. 4.5 million tweets, making this one of the most or the most tweeted about State of the Union addresses in history. And some of the top moments we're seeing right here, POTUS saying we stand for the national anthem was number 1. Number 2, the president discussing immigration reform proposals. Number 3, the president discussing MS-13. We saw some tweets about that as well as people talked about the president's immigration policies, saying that they felt he only really talked about the negatives of groups like MS-13. Didn't talk much more about the Dreamers as we loom toward that deadline for those hundreds of thousands of young immigrants, those undocumented immigrants who are at risk of deportation after March 5th, after they were brought to this country illegally as children. Take a look behind me here. We've got Yorgo here who says on Twitter, all in all, a good, but not anything too much, or pretty much a good speech, but not anything too much unexpected. People were also looking for more specifics. They were looking for details when it came to the president's address. We got Pastor John here who says the booing. Did you guys hear that booing by the Democrats? It came when the president mentioned what he likes to call chain migration. The president said something that he often says when it comes to referring to chain migration, that people are able to bring anyone they want who might be a distant cousin who they're related to into the country if they're an immigrant. That's not exactly a fact or correct. So this person calls out Democrats for booing, says, liking it to when a Republican yelled out, a liar to President Obama during his State of the Union address. So just some sights and sounds from what we're hearing on Twitter. Devin, let me go ahead and send it back to you.
All right, Kenneth Moten, thanks so much for staying on it all night over there at ABC News headquarters. Appreciate it very much. And guys, this was a big moment for the president, just to button things up a little bit. His first State of the Union address. It was a moment of incredible consequence with divisiveness, 2018 looming on the horizon. Tara, give me your bottom line. What did this mean for President Trump tonight?
Honestly, I thought the part of the speech that was the most memorable and the part of it that actually I think a lot of viewers will take away that maybe are less politically minded is how touching the stories were and the guests and how well they were woven into it. And I think listening to the story about the two girls in the MS-13, I mean, you saw people were Googling MS-13 at home. I mean, those stories are extremely powerful. In his address to Congress last year, I would say that Karen Owens, the wife of the Navy SEAL, she really stole the show. That was the most emotionally touching part of this story. Now, did he win over the Democrats? No, but I think he probably, really advocated for those issues in a way that was really powerful to the guests.
And I was struck by how much this was Trump being Trump. We hear about it all the time, and even in this formal setting that the president sort of has come to late in life, he met the moment tonight, but it was so empty in many ways. Democrats not embracing the call to bipartisanship, the rhetoric really not ringing true about being a president for all of Americans in light of what we heard here tonight and heard out in St. Louis. I think it speaks to the challenges that he's going to face ahead, Rick, not only in the next 9 days when they need to fund the government and come to a deal on immigration, but obviously for those midterm elections.
What you saw is what you wanted to see in the president tonight. And I think all of the contradictions and the contradictory impulses of the president were on display. Is he a uniter or is he a divider? We've seen both sides of him. We've heard both sides of him. Even his attempts at unity, I think, showed a lot of division tonight. And I think ultimately, both sides, to my mind, are happy with what they're doing right now. That's a stark statement about the divisions in this country, that you had one side of the aisle standing up and applauding and whooping and hollering for a president who's been as divisive as he's been, and the other side, even when there were attempts at unity, uncomfortable with applauding him because of the other extraneous actions. So this moment is it's a pause, not a pivot. I don't know that we're going to be remembering this tone for much longer than the speech lasted itself. It was a long speech, we should say. But I think it'll be remembered as a moment that crystallized the divisions in this country, because the president was trying to seek a different tone, and I don't think that tone is going to have been received in any way.
And we'll see if the president can keep that tone tomorrow morning and beyond on Twitter, of course, his favorite toy and messaging tool. We'll see what we saw what happened last year. Of course, you can follow all of us on Twitter, and you should follow us on Twitter at Rick Klein, at Devin Dwyer, at Tara Palmieri. We really appreciate you joining us on ABC News digital platforms today, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us there all the time, the Roku box, Xbox, all the above. Subscribe for updates and download the ABC News app. That's the best way to stay up with us, watch our live coverage. And of course, on a night like tonight, get those fact checks. We're doing them for you. We have a team tonight that is compiling the facts. Still at this hour, I think they're up to over a dozen fact checks of things the president said. Go to abcnews.com. check out the fact check and get up to speed. Big thanks to our whole crew here, whole crew in the control room up in New York City, and our hosts here at the Hawk and Dove up on Capitol Hill in Washington. For Rick Klein, political director, to our Paul Murray, our White House correspondent, I'm Devin Dwyer. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.